Chapter 233. It was precisely because she couldn't achieve her goal that Junko had decided to openly dress as a woman and walk out from the group of Japanese envoys. She had also heard that the immortal abode had delicious delicacies that couldn't be found outside, as well as joyous music and dancing. Her curiosity had been piqued, and she wanted to see what was going on. Junko had inherited her parents' strengths, and although she was only 15 years old, she was like the brightest star in the crowd. No one could ignore her even if they wanted to. Important news, important news. The Duke of Zhongdan has opened the Yang Clan Academy, and this has incurred the displeasure of some of the officials. Just a moment ago, the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, He Wenyuan, led a dozen Confucian scholars and officials to the Yang Clan manor to demand an explanation. An earth-shattering shout suddenly came from the crowd, causing many of the men who had been paying attention to Junko to change their minds. Who was Yang Chendong? There was no need for an introduction. There was no one here who didn't know him. Whether it was the immortal abode, the sky beyond heaven, or the Yang Clan Bank, they were all his handiwork. This was the idol of many young people, and now, someone was going to cause trouble for him. This was definitely big news, and a rare occurrence. When the crowd heard the news, they all rushed toward the southern part of the city. They wanted to see how the Dong Shui would deal with He Wenyuan and the other Confucian scholars. At this moment, not only did the line outside shrink, many of the diners who had been eating in the immortal abode also walked out, causing the originally crowded street to become much emptier. With so many people leaving, those who remained were particularly conspicuous. Among them were Junko and several of her guards. Little Lin Kuan, did they go to see the Dong Shui? Junko's crisp voice rang out in somewhat awkward Chinese. Among the guards, a young man with a mustache was originally looking around with a serious expression. When he heard Junko's voice, he immediately turned around and nodded. Princess, they really did go to see the Dong Shui. According to the information we received, the Dong Shui is not in the capital, but in the Yang Clan Manor 15 li south of the city. The Yang Clan Manor? Junko also wants to go take a look. With a trace of desire in her eyes, Junko said in a moving voice. This. Xiao Lin hesitated when he heard the princess' request. In the capital, the princess's safety was guaranteed, but once she left this place, he truly didn't dare to guarantee anything. Not hearing Kobayashi's exact answer, Junko's face flashed an innocent smile. What's wrong? Could it be that Xiao Lin Kuan had no confidence in his own strength? My father has said that little Lin Kuan is one of the best of the younger generation in Japan. Even my father's guards are not much stronger than you. Junko's affirmative voice reached Kobayashi's ears. His body suddenly straightened, and at this moment he seemed to have become much taller. Well, since the princess is interested, Kobayashi will certainly fulfill her wish. Then let's set off now. Alright, thank you for your hard work, Korean Kuan. After her brilliant plan succeeded, Junko's face returned to normal, as if she wasn't the girl who was begging just now. Outside the Yang Manor, He Wenyuan and several other great scholars were standing in the square 50 meters away from the manor. None of them were wearing official robes. Obviously, they were going to question Yang Chendong in an unofficial capacity. It wasn't that He Wenyuan and the others didn't know how to oppress others. On the contrary, it was precisely because they knew about Yang Chendong's achievements and knew that he was the Duke of Loyalty and Courage that they gave up showing themselves as officials. In fact, with their status, they really couldn't make Yang Chendong take the initiative to make any concessions. Yang Si and Yang Lu were standing 50 meters away from He Wenyuan and the others. They stared at everything in front of them, looking at the great scholars and the sea of people behind them. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a sea of people. With a rough estimate, there were more than 1,000 people who came to watch the show. When they were all gathered there, the official road was already crowded with people. Even those who came later to watch the show had to stand by the roadside and the ditches. Since this place became the Yang Manor, it hadn't been so lively. Even when Yang Chendong got married, although there were many guests, there weren't more than 1,000. It was unexpectedly so lively this time. Naturally, Yang Si and Yang Lu, who were responsible for the security of the outer court, were a little nervous. Among the crowd, Junko also came here under the protection of Xiao Lin and the others. It had to be said that in many cases, the use of money was still very great. When Xiao Lin took out some broken silver, he quickly let some people of the great Ming dynasty who came early to watch the show give up the best position. This also allowed Junko to stand in the most advantageous position and watch the battle between the scholars of this foreign country. He Wenyuan and the others came very early, but they weren't in a hurry to say anything. They were waiting for more witnesses to embarrass Yang Chendong. Now that the people had gathered, He Wenyuan and the others looked at each other and reached an agreement. In the end, it was the left assistant minister who stepped forward and said to Yang Si and Yang Lu, who were 50 meters away, "Is the Duke of Zhongdan so arrogant? We have been here for half a day, why haven't we seen him? Could it be that he is afraid?" Afraid? How could our family's duke be afraid of scholars like you? Yang Si's eyes had a hint of ridicule as he stepped forward. Our family's duke is busy every day and has a lot of things to do. He doesn't have time to waste on you. If you don't have anything important to say, please go back. How could He Wenyuan, a great scholar, look good when he was despised by a scholar? But in the end, he had been an official for many years, and his face had long been trained. His anger only lasted for a moment, and he quickly calmed down and asked back, "You said that we are scholars, but does the Duke of Zhongdan look down on all scholars in the world?" Yang Si's face darkened when he was suddenly countered with a slip of the tongue. He wanted to refute something, but he didn't know where to start. After all, fighting with his fists was his forte, and in terms of talking, he was far inferior to the few Confucians. Seeing that Yang Si's face was burning with anger, but he didn't know how to answer, He Wenyuan looked up to the sky and roared, as if he had already won and done something satisfying. "The Duke has arrived." At this moment, a thunderous shout sounded. Yang Chendong, dressed in green and holding a folding fan, approached from afar under the protection of Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and the others. Although it was only a seemingly casual green robe, as Yang Chendong's footsteps continued to approach, a wave of pressure swept over He Wenyuan and the other great scholars. Even the commoners who were closer to them to watch the show felt a sense of oppression. It was as if they were not facing a group of people, but a prehistoric divine beast. Yang Chendong was always like this, giving different people different feelings. As a friend, he was as warm as the sun. As an enemy, he was as happy to suppress them like a storm. When did this duke say that he looked down on scholars? Scholars are a part of this society, just like farmers, merchants, and workers. They can all create value and contribute to the progress of this society. They are all worthy of respect. Before he even arrived, his voice was already heard. It was just one sentence, but it attracted loud cheers from the people who were watching the commotion. Most of the people who came to watch the show were farmers, merchants, and workers. Yang Chendong's words had attracted everyone's consensus, and he had instantly changed his role and become the spokesperson of these people. How could it not arouse everyone's good feelings? However, He Wenyuan and the others who heard this sentence also had ugly expressions on their faces. Regardless of whether others could hear it or not, they heard it very clearly. That was, this loyal duke had compared farmers, merchants, workers, and scholars. Just from this point alone, it was inevitable that they would feel dissatisfied. During the Great Ming Dynasty, not everyone could go to school, nor did they have the opportunity to. Firstly, the cost of studying was high, and it was necessary to hire good teachers to teach, which required money. Secondly, scholars also paid attention to the difference in family background. If one did not have a good family background, even if one went to school and did not have a recommendation, it would be difficult for one to have a bright future. Often, one could only write letters for others and work as an accountant. That was also very difficult to be looked down upon. Thirdly, the proportion of scholars who eventually became a shiozai, an imperial scholar, or an official was relatively small. Many people might have studied for a lifetime, but it would be difficult for them to become a shiozai until they died. It was a waste of money and time, and there might not be a good result. This made most of the people unable to bear it. There were statistics in the history books, and the proportion of scholars in the Great Ming Dynasty was less than 1%. In other words, it was difficult to find one scholar in 100 people, which made their status even more noble. Yang Chendong classified them as ordinary people, so it was no wonder they were angry and did not give him a good face. Loyal Duke? This official knows that you are good with words, and I also know that you have some talent, especially in storytelling, which is beyond the reach of ordinary people. However, establishing an academy is not something that can be done by relying on a few absurd stories. That will only mislead the students, do you understand? He Wenyuan cleverly did not argue with Yang Chendong about the status of scholars. Instead, he went straight to the point, saying that Yang Chendong's ability was limited and that he was not qualified for such a big matter as opening an academy. This official does not know. Yang Chendong waited for He Wenyuan's voice to fall, and straightforwardly shook his head. This official only knows that teaching and educating people is a matter of great virtue. Being able to let the common people of the world know more words, and understand more knowledge, is the way of the good. In order to achieve this goal, this duke's teaching will not charge a single copper coin for tuition, and 2 meals will be provided. If the student is talented, this duke will recommend a suitable position for him or her, so that he or she can bring honor to his or her ancestors and family. Chapter 234. Wow! As soon as Yang Chendong's voice fell, there was a burst of exclamations from the crowd. Teaching without charging a single coin for tuition and taking care of food was something that no school or teacher could do. Those who were ambitious would not be able to meet this requirement because their own strength did not allow them to. Those who were strong would not have such thoughts. They would rather earn more money. How could they work for nothing and have to pay for food? It was because of this contradiction that Yang Chendong's words made everyone so surprised, but at the same time, they were also very excited. Some of the young people from poor families could not help but think that if this was really the case, then could they consider entering the Yang Academy to learn some skills? He Wenyuan also did not expect Yang Chendong to do this. For a moment, he was also stunned by these words. He stood there for a long time and did not say anything. It was not until someone next to him whispered something that he suddenly realized something. He looked at Yang Chendong with a mocking expression and said, "Duke of loyalty and courage, this official knows that you are very good at doing business, but teaching people knowledge is not teaching them to do business. That is to see the real thing, do you know?" Ha! He Wenyuan's words attracted the laughter of his companions. They all looked at Yang Chendong with disdain. It was as if they were saying that he was a businessman and the students he taught were only businessmen. How could he be considered a real scholar? How could he be recognized by the scholars of the world? The mocking voices of these people did not move Yang Chendong at all. He even laughed. "Ha! Who said that this duke only knows how to do business? Have you forgotten who led the army of Walla to defeat them? Besides, it is better to have the guts than to have the guts. If you don't try, how can you know what you can do? Gentlemen, I'm afraid that you can't be literate from the moment you came out of your mother's womb. Is your literary talent extraordinary?" The great Confucian scholars' faces darkened when they heard who was the one who defeated Walla's army. They couldn't help but take half a step back. At this moment, they remembered that the person in front of them was someone who could lead an army to defeat the powerful Walla. He killed people on the battlefield without blinking an eye. If they really angered him, they wouldn't be able to reason with him. On the other hand, He Wenyuan was not as scared as the others. He had a bit of courage. "Duke of loyalty and courage, don't try to change the topic. You know how to do business, you are proficient in the art of war, and you can lead troops into battle. But that doesn't mean that you are proficient in poetry, or that you have truly comprehended the 4 books and 5 classics." During the Great Ming Dynasty, scholars mostly studied the way of etiquette, which was the so-called matters of the sages and virtuous men, and the records of the sages and virtuous men. For example, the Analects of Confucius, the Book of Rites, the 4 books, the 5 classics, and so on. Only those who were proficient in this study and could quote from the past and the present could be regarded as a person with profound knowledge. Only then would they be placed in an important position by the imperial court and enjoy a high position. He Wenyuan mentioned these deliberately to humiliate Yang Chendong. He was just a scholar who was bestowed the title of Juren by the emperor. In addition, he was so young, how could he be proficient in these things? He thought that by saying this, he would embarrass Yang Chendong and make him retreat. But unexpectedly, after hearing this, Dong Shuai didn't have a trace of embarrassment on his face. Instead, he laughed loudly. Isn't it just poetry? This duke can just casually open his mouth and it will be done. Ha! This time, it was He Wenyuan's turn to laugh. Duke of loyalty and courage, there are some things that can't be solved just by talking big. You have to know that it's easy to write a poem. However, if you want to write it well and let people remember it, it's extremely difficult. Don't be careless and lose your status. Of course not. Yang Chendong firmly shook his head. Since this duke is going to write poetry, it will not be in ordinary work. If you don't believe me, Assistant Minister can listen to it and then comment. Seeing that Yang Chendong didn't seem to be joking, He Wenyuan was first stunned. Then, he turned to look at the crowd and found that there were many envoys from other countries. He hesitated. It was true that he came to find trouble with Yang Chendong, and it was also true that he came to make him lose face. But if he really made the Duke of Loyalty and Courage lose face in front of the foreign envoys, it would be unsuitable for the country. He Wenyuan's hesitation was seen by Yang Chendong, and it made his impression of this person much better. Knowing the big picture had its advantages. If this person only came to improve his reputation by stepping on him, then after this matter was over, he would have to settle the score. Since He Wenyuan was in such a difficult position, Yang Chendong didn't give him a chance to choose. He, who was originally very confident, opened his mouth and said, "I saw it." When Yang Chendong, who had raised the topic, opened his mouth, He Wenyuan and the others immediately shut their mouths and looked at him. When he noticed that everyone's attention was on him, a confident smile flashed across Yang Chendong's face. He continued to say, "A shepherd boy rides a yellow ox, his song shakes the forest. He wants to catch a cicada, but suddenly he shuts his mouth." This was written by a famous poet of the Qing dynasty, Yuan Mei. It talked about a little shepherd boy riding on the back of a yellow ox in the dark forest. No one knew what happy thing he had, but he sang along the way. His singing was crisp and loud, and the entire forest was startled by him. Suddenly, the singing stopped. The little shepherd boy straightened his back and closed his mouth. His eyes were fixed on the tall treetops. Cicada, cicada, cicada. In the tree, a cicada was also singing at the top of its lungs. It was the cicada that had attracted the little shepherd boy. He really wanted to catch the cicada. And using this poem, Yang Chendong was also comparing He Wenyuan and the other scholars' arrival to cicada. He himself was a child that could be caught if he wanted to. Comparing a poem to a person, the moment "I saw it" came out, the expressions of He Wenyuan and the others could not help but change greatly. However, this was not the end. It was only the beginning. Yang Chendong's footsteps moved slightly. After taking half a step forward, he opened his mouth and said, "Lotus, an autumn cloud with a speck of red, 10 lotus leaves and 5 flowers. There's no need to close the door to sleep by the lake, the cool breeze fills the house every night. Water dragons chant, white lotus, who removed the red coat for, the green room welcoming the dawn frost? The Huansha people go, the Lingbo people stay, the crystal palace. A few pavilions, 10 miles of silver pond, the cold fragrance blows everywhere. In the dusky gull and heron, the bright flowers of the night, deep and indistinct. What's more, the clouds are clear and practiced, the dance is light and graceful, the fan is half lowered. Light makeup, the moonlight, immortal and elegant, the powder faded. When the small boat returns, the duckweed opens, the mirror looks out. Afraid of the remains, the cold waves, the 10,000 leaves, the west wind war. The former was a poem by Chao Yin of the Qing, and the latter was a poem by Wang Chutong of the Qing. In addition to what they had seen before, there were a total of 3 poems. They were almost all connected and were all good quatrains. For a moment, it naturally shocked He Wenyuan and the others, making it impossible for them to find the problem. They were shocked, but Yang Chendong did not seem to be satisfied. He looked at He Wenyuan and the others who had come looking for trouble and said, "Poetry is only a small path. As long as you study hard and accumulate, it is not difficult to create good sentences. Don't you think so? Well, since you have come today, it would not be right if I did not give you something. This way, I will give you a poem. You must listen carefully. If there is anything you do not understand, you can come back and ask me. Ha! Yang Chendong's proud laughter fell into the eyes of He Wenyuan and the others, making them angry. No matter what, they were people who had been studying for half their lives. Yang Chendong would only be 20 years old during the new year. Even if he could compose a quatrain, it would be impossible for them to ask for advice. This was simply an insult. Everyone looked at Yang Chendong with a few more traces of anger and annoyance. On the other hand, He Wenyuan seemed to have a pretty good ability to calm himself down. When he looked at Yang Chendong, he said, "I wonder what loyal and gallant Duke has to teach us. We are willing to take a look. If there is something we don't understand, we can naturally ask for guidance. However, if you say it out loud, we will understand immediately." Ha! You don't have that high of an IQ. Who would have thought that Yang Chendong directly interrupted He Wenyuan and said, "Listen carefully, I will only say it once. Whether you remember it or not depends on your luck. If you want to learn, you can come and ask for guidance in the future." Yang Chendong seemed to be very confident as he raised his head to look at the sky above him. After muttering to himself for a moment, he slowly said, "The Shi clan's history of lion eating." As soon as the name came out, He Wenyuan and the others were stunned. They were indeed smart enough to suddenly think of something. But then he looked at Yang Chendong with an impossible look, completely with a look of disbelief. However, Yang Chendong didn't even look at them. Instead, he looked up to the sky and said, "Stone chamber poet Shi, the gluttonous lion, swears to eat 10 lions. From time to time, he was a lion in the eyes of the city. 10 o'clock, Shi city. At that time, the clan saw the 10 lions with the power of the 10-stone arrow, and the 10 lions died. She picked up 10 lions' corpses, which fit the stone chamber. The stone chamber was wet, so she sent a servant to clean the stone chamber. She began to eat 10 lions' corpses. When eating, the initial knowledge was 10 lion corpses, 10 stone lion corpses. At that time, the clan's primordial knowledge was the truth. Testing is the matter." When the poem was finally finished, Yang Chendong let out a light breath. For this poem, for this moment of pretentiousness, he had put in a lot of effort last night. Fortunately, he had memorized it perfectly without a word wrong. This poem talked about a poet surnamed Shi. He lived in a house made of stone. He was especially fond of lions and loved to eat lions. He swore to eat 10 lions. He often went to the market to see if lions had appeared. One day, at 10 o'clock, 10 lions just happened to appear in the market. At that time, Shi Jun also came to the market. He saw these 10 lions, so he took out his bow and arrow and shot these 10 lions to death. Shi Jun then picked up the 10 lion corpses and prepared to move them to the stone chamber where he lived. Unfortunately, this stone chamber was very wet. Shi Jun told his servant to wipe the stone chamber clean. After the stone chamber was cleaned, he began to try to eat these 10 lion corpses. When he was about to eat, he realized that these 10 lion corpses weren't real lion corpses, but 10 lions made of stone. Chapter 235. This was a strange article written by Mr. Zhao Yuanren, a famous linguist and the father of modern linguistics, in the 1930s in the United States. The original title of the article was "The History of the Stone Chamber Poets Eating Lions." The full text was 94 words, later expanded to 103 words, including the title of the article, a total of 110 words. If it was read aloud in Mandarin, people who did not understand ancient Chinese would not be able to understand it at all. The reason was that modern Mandarin had lost the entering tone and voicing of ancient Chinese. This was a classic that represented the breadth and profoundness of the Chinese language and Chinese characters. At that time, it had caused a great reaction. Now that it was taken out by Yang Chendong, as expected, He Wenyuan and the others were speechless. They could feel the artistic conception of this poem, and it was very extraordinary. However, because Yang Chendong spoke too quickly and used the same words, they could not understand the essence of it from just one reading. It was precisely because they could not fully understand that at this moment, He Wenyuan and the others were shocked. They stood there dumbfounded and did not know what to say. Isn't it too fast? You don't understand? It doesn't matter, as long as you humbly ask for guidance, I can write down what I just said and take it back for you to study. As if he had already expected such a possibility, Yang Chendong had a very natural and even sincere smile on his face. However, no matter how you looked at it, these smiles seemed a bit too fake, so fake that Wen Yuan and the others felt a sense of shame. In a feudal society where everything was inferior and only scholarly attainments were valued, scholars valued their reputation very much. Not to mention an important imperial court official like Wen Yuan, who was originally a heavenly official of the Ministry of Personnel. Who knew how many students he had, all over the world? How could such a person be willing to bow his head so casually? If you asked him to bow his head in front of everyone and ask for guidance from a young boy who was not even 20 years old, it would be worse than killing him. Wen Yuan would not bow his head no matter what. At this moment, he knew that Yang Chendong was humiliating him, so how could he fulfill the other party's wish? He raised his head with some difficulty, clasped his hands together, and turned to leave. What I saw, Lotus, Water Dragon's Roar, White Lotus, and White Lotus had already defeated them, not to mention that there was also the history of the Shi family eating a lion as the foundation. At this moment, they really didn't know what other meaning there was for them to stay here other than asking for humiliation. Wen Yuan and the others left just like that. When he came with such fanfare and was full of confidence. But when he left, he was so straightforward and so dejected. It was really satisfying. Once these troublemakers left, there was nothing left to watch. Many people also left because of this. However, there were also some scholars who stayed. At this moment, they looked at Yang Chendong with shining eyes and shouted, "Duke Xiongdan, can you write down the history of lion-eating Shi for us scholars to admire?" One person shouted. Soon, many like-minded people followed and shouted, expressing their strong desire for knowledge. Unfortunately, Yang Chendong didn't agree. Instead, he shook his head and said, "This duke understands your intentions. If you want the history of lion-eating Shi to be famous in the world, you must have Lord He and the others personally admit their mistakes. Otherwise, no one can force this duke to do anything. You should go back. If you have the time to stay here and talk to this duke, why don't you go and persuade Lord He and the others? If they are really thinking for the sake of all the scholars in the world, what's the big deal if they bow their heads once?" It seemed like he was pointing out a path for everyone, but he just wanted to use them to put pressure on Wen Yuan. Since they dared to come to Yang village to find trouble with him, they should know the serious consequences of angering him. If he didn't punish them properly, others would follow suit. How could he calm down and do anything else? With Yang Chendong's firm attitude, the scholars who stayed behind knew that it would be difficult for them to take a turn for the better. They immediately cupped their fists and left. Then, one by one, they began to look for their classmates. First, they wanted to tell them what had happened today. Second, they wanted to see if there was any way they could find Lord He and the others and have them admit their mistakes. After all, such a masterpiece shouldn't be buried. It should be spread throughout the world. Soon, most of the people had left. In the end, only Junko and her guards remained. Seeing that everyone had left, the guard captain, Kobayashi, was extremely confused. "Princess, we should go back. If we are late, who knows how long we'll have to wait to eat in the immortal abode." Immortal abode? Kobayashi? Could it be that you've forgotten who founded it? The Yang village must have even better delicacies. Why should we give up what's near for what's far away? Junko was already curious about Yang Chendong. In terms of age, the person in front of her was only 4 or 5 years older than her. There wasn't much of a difference. However, in terms of literary talent and ability, he was far superior to her. Junko had been influenced by her father ever since she was a child. She had always been diligent in her studies. After learning about Japan, she developed a strong interest in the culture of the Great Ming Dynasty. After all, the Great Ming Dynasty was far more fertile than Japan. It was vast and rich in resources and had a much richer history. After coming into contact with the culture of the Great Ming Dynasty and learning about this country, she was quickly drawn in. She knew that this was a country filled with talented people. It was as if there was some kind of magic here. Every once in a while, when the country entered a period of weakness or decline, an extremely powerful figure would appear. That person would step forward to restore order and revitalize the country. They would become even stronger and become a powerful country revered by all. This was the path that Japan had to take. Gradually, Junko was no longer satisfied with her studies. She came to the Great Ming Dynasty just when her father wanted to use the power of the Great Ming Dynasty's marriage to strengthen his ruling power. In Japan, although Junko was still young, she was already famous. Many people even called her the first beauty and the most intelligent woman in Japan for hundreds of years. For a girl to have an angelic face meant that she had endless wealth, not to mention that she was so smart and knowledgeable. If she stayed in Japan, she would have achieved something in the future. However, she didn't do so. Instead, she chose to come to the Great Ming Dynasty. Even if she knew that by doing so, she might have to live with a person she didn't like and didn't know. However, she still didn't regret it. This was because she admired the culture of the Great Ming Dynasty. Now, knowing that the marriage with the Great Ming Dynasty's imperial family might be difficult to continue, Junko's goal this time no longer existed. It was impossible for her to say that she wasn't disappointed at all. But now, she met Yang Chendong, the youngest upstart in the Great Ming Dynasty. He was the youngest person to become a duke with his own hands. His performance just now was so free and easy. He was so smart and knowledgeable. Wasn't such a person the kind of person she wanted to know and find? At this moment, Junko suddenly had an idea. That was, she wanted to stay. She wanted to get in touch with this loyal duke of the Great Ming Dynasty. She wanted to see if he was really talented or just an ignorant and incompetent playboy. If it was the former, she wanted to see if there was anything worth learning. If it was simply to see if she could accept him for her own use. If he was really capable and could play a big role in helping her father, this trip to the Great Ming Dynasty could be considered to have some gains. Of course, Yang Chendong wouldn't accept her, but Junko never worried about this. In her opinion, she was so beautiful. In Japan, even men who were about the same age as her father, or even a lot older than her father, couldn't help but show a greedy look when they saw her. This was where her charm lay. She firmly believed that Yang Chendong would be like other men and would comply with all her requests. After telling the guard captain Kobayashi that she wanted to stay here for a while, Junko strode forward and turned around. She chased after Yang Chendong, who was walking towards the courtyard of the Yang family manor. "Loyal Duke, please wait." The voice of an oriole spread out along with the wind. Yang Chendong, who was striding forward, felt a slight vibration in his ear. His footsteps slowly stopped. It was said that one could recognize a woman by smelling her fragrance, but at the same time, some people also said that a woman's voice was also a kind of name card. When a man heard a beautiful voice, he couldn't help but imagine what the owner of the voice would look like. Just like now, Yang Chendong, when he heard this voice, he had an urgent idea to see what kind of woman could make such a beautiful voice. His footsteps stopped, and his body slowly turned around. When he looked up, his eyes just happened to meet with Junko's gaze. Junko was more than 1.6 meters tall. Perhaps because she was still young, her figure was slightly petite, but it made her have the gentleness and grace of a woman in the Great Ming Dynasty. She had a lock of beautiful hair that fluttered in the wind. Her eyebrows were slender and long, and her eyes were full of charm. Her nose was straight, and her cheeks were slightly flushed. Her lips were tender and alluring, and her dimples were as white as snow. Her skin was as white as jade, and her skin was as white as jade. On her oval face, her eyes were quick-witted, and there was another kind of moving charm in them. At this time, Junko was looking at Yang Chendong with a smile. Her smile was so pure and so clean that Yang Chendong couldn't help but have a feeling that she was an angel in the world. This was the first time Yang Chendong saw Junko, and he had to admit that he was indeed shocked by her beauty. Standing there, he showed a rare look of loss of self-control and stared straight at her for 3 seconds. Chapter 236. Yang Chendong's performance fell into Junko's eyes, and she was very proud of herself. Appearance was her greatest weapon, and now it seemed that it was really effective. Presumably, no matter what kind of request she put forward next, this loyal duke of the great Ming dynasty would definitely not refuse. Junko's pride lasted for 3 seconds. When she wanted to see Yang Chendong's performance, to her disappointment, he actually returned to his previous indifferent smile. She felt that the absent-minded loyal duke just now was so unreal, as if she had imagined it. "Who are you? Where are you from?" While Junko was still in a daze, Yang Chendong had already asked her about her origin. The reason why he asked this question was also because of Yang Chendong's confidence. With the power of the Security Bureau, if there was really such a young and beautiful woman in the capital, it was impossible for them not to even mention it. Although he had never ordered Yang Chendong to collect beautiful women, if there was such a woman, Yang Chendong believed that his subordinates would definitely report it. But there was no such report, so there could only be one answer: this woman did not belong to the capital. Junko had always regarded men as nothing, and except for her father, she rarely pretended to talk to men. But for some reason, when Yang Chendong asked her this question, she couldn't help but reveal her identity. She replied softly, "My name is Ohara Junko, and I am the Princess of Japan." But just after she said this, the captain of the guards, Kobayashi, whispered in disbelief, "Princess, be careful with your words." No wonder Kobayashi was so nervous. It was because Junko's identity had never been disclosed to the outside world. Even the Ministry of Rights of the Great Ming Dynasty did not know about her existence. But now, she took the initiative to reveal it. No wonder he was so anxious. "I'm sorry, Kobayashi, I forgot myself." Junko, who heard the reminder, immediately blushed. She knew that she had made a mistake, and it was not a small mistake. She immediately whispered to Kobayashi in Japanese. The conversation between Kobayashi and Junko was in Japanese, and there was not much difference between it and the Japanese of the later generations. But in the relatively isolated Great Ming Dynasty, there were very few people who could really understand this language, and Yang Chendong was one of them. In his previous life, he went to Japan to perform many tasks, so naturally he was very familiar with the language there. At this moment, he naturally heard the conversation between the master and servant. Although he understood it, the clever Yang Chendong still pretended that he didn't understand it, and even showed that he didn't understand anything. He didn't even clearly hear the first sentence of the identity introduction in Chinese. "What did you say? Junko? What a strange name. Where are you from? Who are your parents?" When Yang Chendong asked like this, it could be noticed that Junko's face instantly relaxed a lot. Junko only heard her name and didn't understand the identity introduction. At the same time, she quickly thought of another identity and said, "I'm a businessman from Japan, an ally of the Great Ming Dynasty. I've long heard that the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty is so prosperous, and I always yearn for it. This time I came out to see the world." Soon, she fabricated an identity, and it was half true and half false, which was no problem for most people in the Great Ming Dynasty. But in the end, she underestimated Yang Chendong too much. Not to mention whether the Security Bureau could find out her true identity. For a loyal man who knew Japanese, what secrets could she have in front of him? It's just that Yang Chendong didn't mean to point it out. Since the other party had intentionally concealed their identity, they must have other motives. Although he was curious, he still decided to get in touch with them and see if there were any opportunities for him to gain. Of course, whether this was related to Junko's beautiful appearance, only the sixth young master Yang himself knew. It turned out to be a foreign friend. Hee, it's this official's eyes that are blind. As you said, the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty is indeed very prosperous. Since you're here, you should take a good look. But forgive this eunuch for being busy, so I won't accompany you," Yang Chendong said with a smile. After saying this, he turned around and left. Yang Chendong's performance, in addition to being polite, also had a trace of unfamiliarity, which made Junko very unhappy. All along, men in her eyes were just lives that only had desires. As long as she wanted, she could summon them at any time and send them away at any time. How could there be someone like Yang Chendong, who didn't seem to be moved by her appearance and took the initiative to keep people 1,000 miles away? Maybe it was because he was not convinced, or maybe it was because he wanted to prove something. Junko unexpectedly said, "Great Ming Dynasty's loyal duke, you just said, the history of lion eating sure, too quickly." This little girl didn't understand it very well. "I don't know if you can ask for advice?" This little girl actually admires the loyal duke very much. While speaking, Junko also showed a shy look as much as possible. This was what she learned from the concubines in her father's imperial palace. Although she looked down on that kind of woman from the bottom of her heart, she had to admit that in order to survive, sometimes their special performance was indeed worth learning. "Oh, you, a girl, are also interested in the history of lion eating, sure?" Yang Chendong, who had half of his body turned around, suddenly raised the corner of his mouth at this moment. He deliberately showed an attitude of isolating the other party in order to change from passivity to initiative. Women, sometimes beautiful women, were so strange. The more you took the initiative, the more unwilling the other party would be to pay attention to you. On the contrary, if you ignored the other party would look at you differently. Just now, Yang Chendong deliberately showed a different attitude, and sure enough, Junko was hooked. Since the other party had such a request, Yang Chendong, who wanted to know the other party's purpose, naturally wouldn't be polite. "Yes, Great Ming Dynasty's loyal duke, this little girl is indeed very interested in the history of lion eating sure." Seeing Yang Chendong turn around, Junko immediately showed a confident look. "You can call me Dong Shuai like others. Since Junko is interested, why don't we talk about it in the manner?" Yang Chendong politely maintained a smile, and then made a gentlemanly gesture. Seeing Yang Chendong's invitation, Junko was very happy, and even lowered her head shyly. She knew that such an approach would be very lethal. "Thank you, Dong Shuai." Junko agreed and strode toward Yang Chendong. Xiao Lin and the other bodyguards followed closely behind him, but when they arrived at the gates of the Yang Manor, Hu Mang, who had always been by the sixth young master's side, suddenly stretched out his large hand and blocked Xiao Lin and the others. He then said in a heavy voice, "The manor is an important place and is considered private property. Outsiders are not allowed to enter without permission. It would be best if you all stood guard outside." Xiao Lin was a little dissatisfied that the princess wasted her limited time in such a seemingly ordinary manner. Now that he heard that he and others were not allowed to enter, how could he be willing to comply? He immediately widened his eyes, looked at Tiger's Mane, and said loudly, "Baka. What do you want to do?" Although Tiger's Mane did not understand Japanese and did not understand the meaning of this sentence, he could see that Xiao Lin was angry. He immediately glared back at him with an unyielding look. As soon as Tiger's Mane got angry, the tall Beta Persei directly took a step forward, almost sticking to Xiao Lin. Then, with his unique height, he stared at Xiao Lin condescendingly, as if he was ready to attack at any time. Not only Beta Persei, but even Yang Wu, as well as Lung Feng of Chiovi's first guard, also looked ready to attack at any time. The originally harmonious atmosphere became a lot more tense because of Xiao Lin's words. A murderous aura filled the place, and even Junko, who did not know Kung Fu, felt a chill. Junko didn't understand why she felt this way, but she was smart enough to know that she didn't have any advantage right now. She immediately scolded Kobayashi in Japanese, "Kobayashi-kun, this is not Japan, nor is it the palace. Please control your temper and personality. Princess, they don't let us in. What if someone wants to harm you? Won't it be very dangerous?" Xiao Lin replied, not to be outdone. In Japan, seniority was still very important. Xiao Lin was just a guard captain. Logically speaking, he should not talk to his master like this. But when it came to the other person's life, he did not have to worry so much. It was because Junko knew this that she did not blame Xiao Lin. On the contrary, she also thought that it was indeed too risky to enter Yang Village alone. After a slight hesitation, she nodded, "Well, you are right. Let's leave." After Junko finished talking to Kobayashi, she looked at Yang Chendong and said with a beautiful smile, "Dong Shuai, I'm very sorry. My servant reminded me that I have something important to do. I think I have to leave first." She even knew the name of the servant. Yang Chendong was very interested in Junko. He was even more curious about her purpose in coming to the great Ming dynasty. That is really bad news. But since Miss Junko has something important to do, I won't delay you any longer, please. Thank you, Dong Shuai, for your understanding. If there is a chance, I will definitely come to visit Dong Shuai. Junko said very politely. There will definitely be a chance. Yang Chendong said with incomparable certainty. Of course, in Junko's eyes, it was hard to say whether this person was too arrogant or not. Finally, Junko left with Xiaolin and 7 or 8 guards. She left Yangjia village. Yang Chendong's gaze followed them as they left. Even when they were out of sight, Yang Chendong still maintained the same posture as before. Chapter 237. Cough, young master, Miss Junko has left. Seeing Yang Chendong still standing there in a daze, although Tiger's Mane didn't want to, he still reminded him. Well, I know. Hearing this, Yang Chendong came back to his senses, but his face was as usual, without the slightest embarrassment. In fact, there was nothing to be embarrassed about, because he wasn't thinking about Junko, nor her beauty, but the purpose of her visit. Because in the history he knew, there didn't seem to be such a woman, but she still came, which could only mean one thing, that history has changed, and his advantage of foresight has gradually been lost. In fact, in history, although there was a person called Junko, she didn't come to the Ming dynasty. At that time, although the Ming dynasty defeated the Wala, it was a narrow victory, and such a record certainly didn't attract the admiration and respect of others, so Junko didn't come to the Ming dynasty. All of this changed because of the appearance of Yang Chendong. Tiger's Mane informed the Security Bureau to investigate the Japanese diplomatic mission, if necessary, spend a lot of money to buy 1 or 2 people. It was precisely because he knew that the advantage of foresight was gone, that Yang Chendong needed to deal with everything carefully. Young master, don't worry, Tiger's Mane said confidently. In their eyes, a small country like Japan was just a pirate, not worthy of being treated seriously. This was all because he didn't know that the invasion of Japan would happen hundreds of years later, and he didn't know what kind of ambitions the country on this island would have in the future. But Yang Chendong knew, instinctively, he never underestimated this country and its people, so he paid special attention to anything related to them. With the order of the 6th young master, the Security Bureau quickly and effectively operated. Soon, they bribed a cook from the Japanese diplomatic mission with a large sum of money. From the cook, they not only learned about Junko's situation, but also made a rough outline of the political situation in Japan. The information was sent to Yang Chendong's study early the next morning, and after the 6th young master spent a lot of effort to deal with Hu Yen and the other girls, he saw the latest information on the table. Junko's appearance naturally couldn't be hidden from Hu Yen and Xiao Yin, the 2 girls who stayed in the manor. In fact, Yang Chendong didn't need to hide it from them. It was precisely because of this that Hu Yen and Xiao Yin felt a sense of crisis when they heard that a beautiful girl, who was only 15 or 16 years old, had appeared outside the Yang family manor and met with the 6th young master. After some discussion, they immediately notified Madame Shui and Madame Xiang, who were still in the capital, who were editing the program. That night, they had a fierce battle with Yang Chendong, but the 6th young master, who was in peak condition, was not afraid of them, and just spent a little more time and effort to deal with them. In the morning, Yang Chendong saw the information on the table, and it gave him a general understanding of the current situation in Japan, and at the same time, he quickly came up with a way to deal with it. Once, the non-mainstream crosstalk actor Guidigang said, "Give me 3,000 urban management, and I can flatten Tokyo." Yang Chendong also had such a dream, but it could only be a dream. Under the premise of world peace, such a dream was destined to be impossible and impossible to achieve. But now, it was different. Although it was still the same world, it was hundreds of years earlier, and the world had not even experienced the First World War. Some of the powerful countries in history were still in the early stages of development, and some, such as the United States, had not even appeared yet. With such a good opportunity, Yang Chendong would of course make the first move, and the so-called powerful countries could go to hell. There could only be one order in this world, and that was, the Han people were the masters, the Han people were the center, and the Han people's will was the world's will, and the Han people's thoughts were the world's thoughts. Since that was the case, there was no need for Japan to exist, and it was inevitable to understand them in advance. Yang Chendong also thought about this problem when he had nothing to do. Japan was different from some Western countries, and they actually had some relations with the Han people. Some people even said that Japan was a branch of the Han people, and there was a basis for it. Although it was not accepted by the world, one thing was true, and that was, other than the language, the Japanese looked the most similar to the Han people. Should such a country be completely destroyed, or assimilated for his own use? If it was the latter, what should he do? Junko's appearance was an opportunity to let Yang Chendong see the opportunity to break the fortress from the inside. Come on, inform Yang-san, let him spread the news, and do it like this. Calling Tiger's mane in front of him, Yang Chendong whispered. In a medium-sized inn in the capital, Junko had just woken up, but looking at her state, it was obvious that she did not sleep well last night. After coming out of the Yang village, Junko did not idle, but did a lot of work and understanding. But the more she did so, the more Yang Chendong's name lingered in her mind. Previously, she only knew that the army that defeated the Walla was led by a loyal duke of the great Ming dynasty. In the future, it was just a matter of relying on the strength of the army and the number of people to win. But after yesterday's trip to Yang village, Junko had a certain understanding of him. She realized how young and talented this Duke of Loyalty was, and how he managed to achieve what he had today. Yang Bao, Immortal Abode, Heaven Beyond Heaven, Yang Family Bank, and Yang Family Bank, one after another, especially the most mysterious mercenary group. When all this information was gathered in front of Junko, she could not even look down on this person. Princess, what's wrong? Did you not sleep well last night? Captain Kobayashi walked into the room at this time, and when he saw Junko's slightly haggard appearance, he immediately asked with a face full of surprise. Kobayashi was secretly happy to accept the task of protecting Junko. He was also a man, and a young man at that, so he naturally liked Junko's appearance very much. But he was very clear about the difference between his identity and the princess's. It was impossible to be together, but being able to have close contact with her, how could it not be a kind of satisfaction? Therefore, in his heart, Kobayashi cared a lot about Junko. Seeing that the princess seemed to be in a bad mood, he naturally turned pale with fright. It's nothing, Kobayashi. I just miss my imperial father a little. By the way, I'll have to trouble you to collect information about this loyal duke. The more the better, and the more detailed the better. Please. Junko forced a charming smile and said to Kobayashi, "Hai, please rest assured, princess. I will do it immediately." Kobayashi saw that the princess was so happy with him, and was naturally very happy. He immediately agreed and turned around to carry out the task. But what Kobayashi did not know was that not long after he left, the Japanese diplomatic mission arrived in the vicinity of the inn and began to investigate. This time, the Japanese diplomatic mission sent a lot of people, and many of them were representatives of merchants. They wanted to investigate the great Ming dynasty's market and see if there was any possibility of further trade relations. While deepening the understanding between the two countries, it would also enrich the Japanese economy. After all, a small country like Japan almost had to buy many things from outside. This gave Junko an opportunity. After spending a lot of money to get a place, she disguised herself as a man and hid in the diplomatic mission. Logically speaking, she was not discovered all the way. Now that she had successfully arrived at the great Ming dynasty's capital, the possibility of being discovered was even smaller. But all of this was ruined by the appearance of Yang Chendong. Not long ago, the head of the Japanese diplomatic mission, Aoki Yuki, received an important message from his cook. It was that the daughter of the Emperor, Ohara Junko, had arrived in the great Ming dynasty and was walking around with ominous intentions. When he received this news, Aoki Yuki's face was naturally full of disbelief. He was the confidant of General Ashikaga Yoshimasa, which was why he was able to get such a good job. But if he let the general know that the princess was also in the diplomatic mission and was in contact with the higher-ups of the great Ming dynasty, his life would be in danger. Therefore, regardless of whether the news was true or false, Aoki Yuki had to investigate the matter clearly. If he believed that Princess Junko was really in the Great Ming Dynasty, then there was no need to say anything. He had to kill her. First, to eliminate future troubles, and second, to create a gap between the Great Ming Dynasty and the Emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty. If there was a murder case, it would be even more difficult to unite them. The emperor would have to rely on the power of General Ashikaga Yoshimasa. Only in this way could the general's position be unshakable. Aoki Yuki made a decision and immediately called his guard, Iwai Shang, to report the news. At the same time, he also ordered an investigation. If the situation was true, he could deal with it on the spot. After receiving the order, Iwai Shang brought people to the inn. After investigating, they really found out that Junko was in the inn. While Iwai Shang was shocked, he reported the news to the higher-ups and informed the head of the diplomatic mission, Aoki Yuki. After some discussion, they decided to take action while it was dark. They had to kill Junko and the others in the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty. Through the cook who was bribed with money and the observation of the Security Bureau's spies, Yang Chendong easily determined the decision and mission of the Japanese diplomatic mission. He immediately laughed. Very good, the young master naturally won't let go of the opportunity. A hero saving a beauty? This young master likes it very much. Immediately, after Yang Chendong sighed, he also made a careful arrangement. In the evening, Xiao Lin, who had been running around all day, rushed back with a few guards. According to the instructions of Princess Junko, they collected a lot of information about Yang Chendong. Chapter 238. Speaking of which, this truly wasn't that difficult of a task, because any random person from the streets of the capital would be able to tell one some stories about the Dong Shui. Bringing a lot of information back to the inn, Kobayashi handed it over to Junko. When he saw the happy expression on her face, he felt that his efforts today weren't in vain. Only now did he have time to eat something to fill his stomach. Just as Kobayashi was about to start eating, a trusted guard came in from outside the door. "Captain, the situation outside doesn't seem right. I keep feeling that there is a pair of eyes watching us in the dark." What? Throwing away the food in his hand, Kobayashi turned around and looked at the guard who came to report the news with a shocked face. He believed in the ability of his subordinates, and there were some things that he wouldn't say casually. Even if he said it, he should be able to find something. At this moment, he didn't want to eat anymore. Instead, he turned around and walked out of the kitchen, went to a corner of the small courtyard, and began to close his eyes and sense. Kobayashi was originally a guard of the royal family. Because of his outstanding performance, he was arranged to protect the safety of Princess Junko. His strength wasn't weak, and he even came from a ninja family. It was precisely because of this that he quickly sensed something different and a vague sense of danger. Ninjas sometimes have a very strong sixth sense, and Ikigami and the others aren't that strong, so Kobayashi quickly felt the danger. When he learned that he was being watched, Kobayashi didn't panic. This was originally within his expectations. With so many people, and the princess was so beautiful, it was difficult not to be discovered, but he didn't expect it to be so fast. It was precisely because he was prepared that Kobayashi calmly came to the young master's room. At this time, Junko was looking down at some information about Yang Chendong. When she saw the guard captain suddenly appear, she was a little surprised. "Kobayashi? Don't you need to rest? Why you here? We don't need you now, go rest." "Princess, we've been discovered. There are many unfamiliar faces outside the inn. It's very likely that they were sent by Ambassador Aoki. I think we need to move," Xiao Lin said in a slightly anxious voice, his eyes filled with determination. Junko was like a goddess in Kobayashi's eyes. As long as he was still alive, he would never let anyone hurt the princess. "What?" Junko said in Japanese in surprise, and then a hint of nervousness appeared on her face. Originally, according to Junko's plan, the danger was only on the voyage from Japan to the Great Ming Dynasty. As long as she safely arrived at the Great Ming Dynasty, she could reveal her identity and then propose marriage to the Great Ming Dynasty's emperor. At that time, whether she chose a prince or even the great Ming dynasty's emperor, she would not have to worry about her safety. However, because she had no understanding of the situation in the great Ming dynasty, she didn't know until she came to the capital. Although the great Ming dynasty's emperor had a prince, he was still in his infancy and it was impossible to arrange a marriage. As for the great Ming dynasty's emperor Zhu Qiyu, although he was very young, he didn't have any deep foundation. In addition, there were many concubines in the palace. Even if he wanted to arrange a marriage, it would be difficult for him to provide any help to Japan in a short time. Not to mention that the great Ming dynasty was now ruled by 2 emperors. She hadn't even solved her own problems. It was even more difficult to get support. The marriage didn't seem to be feasible, so Junko didn't immediately reveal her identity, which also made her safer. Now that the opponent finally came to her door, how could she not panic? Kobayashi, where are we going? After the panic, Junko pretended to be calm and said, after all, she was only a little girl less than 16 years old. Although she was born noble and very beautiful, when it came to facing a real sword, she was afraid that she didn't have any more experience than others. Kobayashi doesn't know. He shook his head very honestly. Princess, you can choose to reveal your identity and marry the great Ming dynasty's emperor as a concubine, or we can kill our way out of the capital, find a place with a coastline, and find a boat to return home. Although Kobayashi was confident in his own strength, he only had 8 guards with him this time, and the disadvantage in numbers was his shortcoming. He knew very well that Aoki Yuki, as an ambassador, was leading a team of nearly 500 people. Among them, there were more than 300 soldiers who could fight. He didn't have much confidence in ensuring Naoki's safety in a battle of 8 against 300 people. Let me think about it. Junko didn't expect the choice to come so quickly, and she couldn't make a decision for the time being. After all, this was related to her marriage. The man a woman chose was often related to her life's happiness, so she had to think about it. Princess, there's not much time left. Please make a decision as soon as possible. I'll go out and take a look. Kobayashi didn't want Junko to make the first choice. No man would be able to accept the idea of giving away their goddess. But he couldn't guarantee that the princess could leave safely, so he was in a dilemma. He might as well not participate and let the princess make a wise decision. Some decisions weren't so easy to make. While Junko was still in a dilemma, Kobayashi once again entered the room without permission. This time, his face became much more serious. Princess, it's already dark and they're about to make a move. There are enemies at the front door, back door, and side door of the inn. I'm afraid we'll have to kill our way out. Kill our way out? Will we die? Junko's nature as a young girl finally revealed itself. After all, she was still young, and few people wouldn't be afraid in the face of death. Junko's expectant expression made Kobayashi's heart bleed. He didn't want to disappoint the princess, but he didn't have absolute confidence. He could only avoid the question and say, Princess, as long as I'm still alive, I won't let anyone hurt you. The hidden meaning was that as long as Kobayashi was still alive, he would desperately protect Junko's safety. But what if he died? After Junko understood the meaning of these words, she nodded with a blank expression. Well, then we'll rush out. If possible, we'll go to the seaside and find a way to return home. Junko finally made a decision, and that was to not marry the great Ming dynasty. Every woman had her own dreams, not to mention a girl like Junko who had been high and mighty since childhood. She might have more pursuits for marriage, but her man was destined to be different from the rest. He was destined to be the strongest in the world. After Junko decided not to marry the great Ming dynasty, Kobayashi's face lit up with joy. For him, even if they couldn't live together, being able to die together was a very happy thing. After unifying the goal, Junko first changed into a set of black clothes that she had prepared beforehand. The loose clothes not only allowed her to hide better in the dark, but also allowed her to conceal her perfect identity. After everything was done, under the protection of Kobayashi, the group of 6 rushed out of the inn's front door. As expected of a guard who had once stayed in the imperial family, Kobayashi didn't choose to blindly attack. Instead, he sent 2 of his team members to rush out of the back door, and another 2 to rush out of the side door, creating an illusion that they were about to break out of the encirclement. Then, he led the remaining 4 guards to protect the princess from the front door. The reason why they chose the front door was because it was on the street. From here, they could see the soldiers of the military office patrolling the area. Although these people might not necessarily help them, they could at least deter the enemy. Under the leadership of Kobayashi, the 6 people rushed out of the inn's front door. What greeted them was a rain of short arrows. He saw Kobayashi holding a ninja sword and constantly waving it in front of him. One after another, the arrows hit the blade, making crackling sounds before falling to the ground. Hurry up and rush out. Seeing that the enemy had even used bows and arrows, Kobayashi knew that the situation was more serious than he had imagined. These people had no scruples at all. They just wanted to kill the princess. A wave of arrows was blocked by Kobayashi and his team. The price they paid was that one of the guards was injured by an arrow and lost the ability to move quickly. However, at this time, Kobayashi didn't have time to check the injuries of his brothers. What he had to do now was to take advantage of the enemy's second wave of attacks to leave this place as soon as possible. The farther the better. Follow me, rush out of here. Before he could finish his words, 4 figures suddenly appeared in front of him. They appeared like ghosts, and then 4 ninja swords slashed toward him. For ninjas, facing such opponents, Kobayashi was shocked. At the same time, he stomped his feet on the ground and jumped into the air. He shouted in Japanese, "Protect the princess." Kobayashi couldn't help but be surprised. He originally thought that Ambassador Aoki Yuki only sent samurai. Although they were difficult to deal with, they still had a chance of survival. But now, seeing ninjas who were famous for being good at assassination, he knew that this time he was afraid that things were not looking good for him. Although the strength of the 4 ninjas was not as good as his, after all, there were too many opponents. If it was just to protect himself or even escape, Kobayashi still had some confidence, but his duty was to protect the princess, which was very difficult to accomplish. Kobayashi, who was in the air, quickly flashed through his mind, but at the same time his empty left hand was not idle. When he reached into his pocket and took out a few ninja darts in his hand. Swish! With a wave of his left hand, the darts were thrown out with great force. They flew straight toward the 4 ninjas who were chasing after him. Kobayashi, whose strength was far higher than ordinary people, successfully pierced the throat of a ninja. One of the 4 opponents was killed. However, Kobayashi was not happy at all, because he had noticed that the 3 men who were protecting the princess had been surrounded by a group of black-clothed samurai. The princess, who was surrounded in the middle, was pale. She was like a small boat in the sea, which could capsize at any time. Chapter 239. The situation was so dangerous that Kobayashi, who could have continued to fight in a guerrilla style, gave up his advantage. Instead, he rushed into the crowd on the street, and then rushed to the left and right, killing 3 Japanese samurai in a row. Kobayashi's speed was very fast, and his sword moves were also very strange. Coupled with his unpredictable movements, it would take a lot of effort for anyone to kill him. Unfortunately, his mission was to protect Princess Junko. For this purpose, he had no choice but to give up his advantage. He turned around and rushed into the crowd, waving his sword and slashing. The sudden addition of Kobayashi did indeed relieve the pressure of the 3 guards protecting Junko, but as more and more men in black rushed over from the back door and the side door, Kobayashi knew that the 4 men he sent to the east and attack in the west were probably dead, and it should be his turn next. The 3 guards, plus Kobayashi and Junko, were surrounded by 40 to 50 black-clothed men. Long bows and short swords rained down on them, and in less than 30 breaths of time, 2 more of the 3 guards fell. Finally, only Kobayashi, the princess, and the last guard were left. "Captain, I'll fight with them. Please protect the princess and rush out." The last guard saw no hope. After shouting at Kobayashi, he rushed out. However, when he was still halfway out, his chest had been hit by 3 arrows. Then, with his eyes wide open, his body leaned back and fell heavily to the ground. Ah! Seeing the death of her bodyguard at such a close distance, Junko, who had always been calm, finally screamed out in horror. In the dark night, her cry was like the cry of an oriole. It was so different and so amazing. Who is it? Perhaps it was because of the shout, or perhaps it was not time for her to die. A thunderous voice sounded, and suddenly, a group of people appeared on the other side of the street, slowly approaching. Captain Ikes, who was leading the team, saw that the target was close at hand and the mission was about to be completed. Suddenly, another group of people came from behind. His eyes showed that he was unwilling to give up. Come on, rush up, kill the target, and then retreat. Ikes thought that there was still some distance between the two sides. As long as he was given time, killing the princess and Kobayashi was just a matter of raising his sword. Qi Shang's idea was not wrong. At a distance of a few dozen meters, he did have the opportunity to make a move. Unfortunately, he didn't know who was approaching in the dark. If it was daytime and he could see the luxurious carriage clearly, he wouldn't think so. For no other reason than the fact that the owner of this luxurious carriage was known to everyone in the capital, the Duke of Loyalty, Yang Chendong. It was Yang Chendong who was passing by. As for whether it was intentional or not many people knew. The important thing was that Yang Chendong had indeed appeared here and allowed his servant, Beta Persei, to yell at him first. But after he shouted, the other party had no intention of stopping. This infuriated Beta Persei. Young master, these people won't listen to our advice. Should we attack? Please give the order. Yang Chendong's emotionless voice came from the luxurious carriage. Standing on the street were all Japanese samurai and ninjas. He wouldn't feel the slightest bit of heartache no matter how many of them died, nor would he show any mercy. Standing on both sides of the carriage, a row of Lung Feng had been waiting for this order for a long time. When they heard the word, "Sixth Young Master," the 30 people of Lung Feng started a shooting competition by themselves. The reason why it was called a competition was because the three classes were competing with each other to see who could achieve more. Bang bang bang. In the dark night, the sound of gunshots was so deafening and earth-shattering. Along with the sound of gunshots, a dazzling red light flashed like a meteor, and the Japanese samurais standing dozens of meters away fell to the ground one by one. "Princess, get down." Seeing the red light coming, Kobayashi instinctively hugged Junko and threw himself to the ground. But he didn't know how superfluous this action was. The Lung Feng had already received the order not to hurt the princess. With night vision goggles, how could they hurt Junko in the dark? Bursts of gunshots sounded like firecrackers being ignited. After 2 waves of continuous attacks, there were no more samurai standing on the street. In a short time, except for a few people like Ikegami who reacted very quickly and escaped at the first time, the other Japanese samurai present on the scene were all killed. Clean up the battlefield. Seeing that the scene became silent after a burst of gunshots, Tiger's Mane replaced Yang Chendong and shouted the order. For a time, 30 Lung Feng and Chiu V's first guard began to move forward in a searching manner. In the process of moving forward, there were gunshots from time to time. Whenever they found someone who was not dead, the Lung Feng automatically fired a shot. This also depended on the usual training and teaching. In Yang Chendong's words, most of the time, mercy to the enemy was cruelty to oneself. The sound of gunshots came from time to time, making the samurai who were injured but not dead show a determined look on their faces. Knowing that they couldn't escape death if they continued to hide like this, they stood up one by one, wanting to make a last stand. But such an action was not even a threat in the eyes of the Lung Feng. They were already prepared, so they only needed to keep pulling the trigger, and the samurai who stood out voluntarily became a ghost under the gun. At this time, Junko was also lying on the ground. Although she was protected by Kobayashi, she was still trembling. She didn't know who was coming, and she didn't know what fate was waiting for her. She didn't even dare to think about it. Compared with Junko, who was scared, Kobayashi's heart was also flustered. He was very clear about the strength of these samurai and even some ninjas. But these people were so vulnerable in front of the people who came, he couldn't help but think, if it was him, facing advanced firearms, how likely would he be to survive? While he was still comparing in his heart, the footsteps were getting closer and closer, and when they were about to reach him, Kobayashi finally couldn't help but shout in somewhat awkward Chinese, "Don't kill us, we surrender." It was very difficult to make a samurai, a ninja of the Japanese imperial family, shout out surrender, and this was equivalent to Kobayashi cutting off his own path as a samurai. But for the sake of the princess under him, he made this decision resolutely. Kobayashi's sudden shout attracted the attention of the 5 Lung Feng with guns. In fact, they have been paying attention to the movements here for a long time. Even if Kobayashi didn't shout, they would soon find this place. Shouting was just a way to reveal their position in advance. As if to prove that he didn't want to kill, after Kobayashi shouted, he took the initiative to throw the ninja sword in his hand to the ground, then stood up with his hands on his head. "Don't kill us, we are also victims." "Yes, we are victims." As Kobayashi stood up, Junko was also liberated, and naturally stood up and imitated Kobayashi, holding his head with both hands, with a pitiful expression. "Bring them to the young master." Seeing that the princess appeared, safe and sound, Tiger's man, who was in charge of commanding the battle, was relieved, and then took the initiative to step forward, leading Junko and Kobayashi to the side of the luxurious carriage. Kobayashi was naturally specially treated, and he was stopped a dozen meters away from the carriage. But this time, in the face of dozens of black muzzles, he became very obedient. Junko, who followed Tiger's man, smoothly came to the side of the carriage, and saw the scene of the carriage curtain being lifted, revealing the young and confident face of Yang Chendong. It turned out to be Miss Junko. "We are really fated." Yang Chendong slightly raised the corner of his mouth, revealing a faint smile while looking at Junko. Junko didn't expect that the person turned out to be Yang Chendong, but since it was an acquaintance, of course, it couldn't be better. She immediately exclaimed, "Dong Shuai, someone wants to kill me, please save me." Who did such a beautiful Junko offend? Why did you make such a big fuss? Yang Chendong didn't say whether he wanted to save them or not. Instead, he looked like he wanted to know the reason. Junko didn't want to expose her identity too early. After all, she didn't know Yang Chendong, and if she exposed her identity, what would she do if he used it to threaten her father? But now that she needed his help, how could she explain the situation in front of her? Junko was still struggling whether to tell her true identity in order to answer Dong Shuai's question. At the other end of the street, there was a burst of dense and complicated footsteps. Hearing the footsteps, Junko's face was once again filled with fear. Yang Chendong, on the other hand, seemed to have expected all of this and didn't show the slightest surprise. Instead, he showed a warm smile to Junko. "Well, you get on the carriage first. And that guy called Little Lin, take off his black clothes and change into our clothes." Junko's small hand was grasped by Yang Chendong's big hand and pulled into the carriage. Perhaps because the force was too great, she lost control for a moment and directly rushed forward, until she hit Yang Chendong's broad arms. Only then did she stop. Suddenly being held in Yang Chendong's arms, her nose could smell the strong smell of male hormones. For a moment, Junko was so frightened by the sudden change in front of her that she didn't dare to move. Don't look at how confident she was in front of men, but it was the first time for her to be so close to the opposite sex. Even her father didn't hold her like this. Now, feeling the strong heartbeat in Yang Chendong's chest, she was intoxicated for a moment. Chapter 240. Yang Chendong didn't feel anything wrong. For Junko to throw herself into his arms, he just thought that he had used too much strength just now. This was caused by his underestimation of Junko's body weight. Junko still had a confused expression on her face as she hid in Yang Chendong's arms. A group of people had arrived in front of the carriage a dozen meters away. When these people saw the corpses on the ground and the smell of blood, they instinctively raised their short swords and spears in their hands. The atmosphere instantly became cold and solemn. "Who are you?" the general leading the group asked in a nervous tone. In his hand, he was holding a fireball that could be fired into the air at any time. As long as the fireball was in the air, this area would quickly be surrounded by the Ming army. At that time, even a mouse would find it difficult to escape. "Who are you? Why don't you greet the Duke of Loyalty?" Whose subordinates are you? Seeing more and more people in the night, Tiger's mane was not afraid at all. On the contrary, he was full of energy and shouted loudly. This shout also caused Junko, who was in the luxurious carriage, to tremble. She couldn't help but put more strength into her hands. Her hands that were holding Yang Chendong's waist tightened even more. Don't be nervous, nothing will happen. Feeling Junko's nervousness and fear, Yang Chendong stretched out his right hand and patted her back gently. That magnetic voice was like the sound of nature pouring into Junko's ears, making her feel so warm and so reassuring. From childhood to adulthood, because of her identity, Junko didn't have much contact with the opposite sex. There were even fewer men who could give her a sense of security. It seemed that her father, the emperor, was one of them. Most of the time, he didn't accompany her. Instead, he was always worried about the state affairs, so it became an extravagant hope for her to ask for her father's embrace. Now, lying in Yang Chendong's arms, feeling the strong and clear heartbeat, coupled with the sound that could make people feel at ease, at this moment, Junko actually had a kind of intoxicated feeling. It was just like the old saying, "It's not the wine that gets you drunk, but you get yourself drunk." On the street, Tiger's mane's voice could be heard clearly. The soldiers of the warden's office, who had been somewhat nervous and ready to fight at any moment, quickly dispersed when they heard that the person opposite them was the Duke of Loyalty. The leading general knelt on the ground and said in an excited voice, "I am a subordinate of the 5 cities military division's Sun Pyong. Greetings, Duke of Loyalty." Greetings, Duke of Loyalty and Courage. Hundreds of soldiers from the warden's office of the 5 cities followed their general and knelt on the ground, shouting loudly. After defeating Walla twice in a row, the Duke of Loyalty had been given the title of War God in the warden's office of the 5 cities. Everyone respected Yojia. Now that they knew that the one who came was the war god, who would dare to have the thought of using swords and spears? Although there were many people, just the title of the Duke of Loyalty and Courage was enough to make them all kneel on the ground. This scene was seen by Junko, who had already lifted the curtain of the sedan. This scene immediately stimulated the depths of her heart and made her more interested in Yang Chendong. So it's Sun Pyong's subordinates. You are all on the same side. Get up. Yang Chendong, who was sitting in the carriage, said in a clear voice. Then he said, "Tiger's mane, stay here and deal with the matter here. Find out who attacked me and be sure to give an explanation. The rest of you will follow me back to Yang village." "Don't worry." Tiger's mane bowed with his fists clasped. When he raised his head, he gave Yang Chendong a look of understanding. Obviously, he had understood the meaning of the young master. That was, he wanted to use this opportunity to make trouble and teach these people who killed Junko a lesson. Farewell, Duke of Loyalty and Courage. Hundreds of soldiers of the warden's office of the 5 cities had just gotten up. When they saw that Yang Chendong was about to leave, they immediately knelt on the ground again and said in unison. Under the gaze of the great Ming Dynasty soldiers, Yang Chendong's luxurious carriage drove out of the capital under the protection of the First Guard and Lung Feng. It went straight to the Yang village 15 miles south of the city. When the carriage left the capital, the originally dark carriage suddenly lit up. The lantern in the carriage was lit. Junko also left Yang Chendong's arms with a red face. At this time, she finally had a chance to look around. When she saw that the carriage was so spacious that there was no problem for her to lie down here, she couldn't help but widen her eyes in surprise. As a princess, she had seen more than the average person since she was a child. It was not that she had never seen a spacious carriage, but it was the first time that she had seen such a spacious carriage, especially one that moved so steadily without any bumps. Of course, she didn't know that the bottom of the carriage was installed with a shock absorption system. The wheels were not ordinary wooden wheels, but were replaced with tires. It could be said that for the sake of comfort, many things in the large warehouse were used. This was why it could be so spacious and stable. Of course, there was only one such carriage in the entire Great Ming Dynasty. Even the emperor didn't have one. He looked around curiously. After a while, he finally got a general idea of the place. Then he noticed that Yang Chendong was staring at him. He immediately lowered his head and said embarrassedly, "Sorry, I'm really ignorant. I've made a fool of myself in front of Dong Shuai." "What? Anyone who enters the carriage for the first time will be like this. It's not strange." Yang Chendong shook his head and said indifferently, "What? Did a lot of people enter the carriage? I don't know who they are." Junko asked curiously, but she was afraid that only she knew what she was thinking. "There are several people. My 4 wives have stayed here before, and my 7th sister." Yang Chendong seemed to think for a moment, and then answered unhurriedly. When she heard Yang Chendong say that he already had 4 wives, Junko's eyes showed a trace of struggle. She seemed to be entangled with something, but her good psychological quality made her quickly return to normal. "Is that so? Dong Shuai already has 4 wives. It's really enviable." That's not bad. Many people say the same thing." Yang Chendong laughed, as if having 4 wives was something to be proud of. After laughing, he asked curiously, "Miss Junko, I saved you today. Can you tell me why those people wanted to kill you?" "Didn't I say it before? I was born in a merchant family, and these people came for money. Fortunately, Dong Shuai passed by here and saved this little girl's life." Junko didn't even blink when she lied. She just opened her mouth. All of this was something she had thought out after entering the carriage. Before she had a complete understanding of Yang Chendong, she would not easily reveal her identity. "So that's how it is. In that case, those killers were killed by my servants and guards. You should be safe now, so it's better to say goodbye." Yang Chendong saw that Junko didn't speak the truth, so he didn't point it out, but said very casually. It was as if saving her was really a casual thing for him. Yang Chendong's sudden words suddenly made Junko's face change. Just a moment ago, she was thinking about how to get out of this carriage and leave Yang Chendong. She didn't believe that a person who could marry 4 wives could ignore her beauty. But before she could say anything, he took the initiative to ask her to leave. She achieved her goal so easily, which made Junko somewhat uncomfortable and gave birth to another idea. This was the wilderness. If she got off the carriage, where would she go? If the killers were following her, they wouldn't be so lucky to meet Yang Chendong. Since it was dangerous to leave here, why not follow Yang Chendong back to the Yang family manor? Although there might be other dangers, it was better than losing one's life. Thinking that Yang Chendong was a loyal duke of the great Ming dynasty, he shouldn't do things that were difficult for her. Junko instantly made a decision. When she looked at the 6th young master, there was a trace of obvious gentleness in her eyes. "Dong Shuai, this little girl is alone. You can't really leave me here. It's so dark outside I will be scared. How can you be alone? Don't you have a guard? You can rest assured that I will leave him to protect you." Yang Chendong pretended to be puzzled and said. Hearing that Yang Chendong misunderstood her meaning, Junko was ashamed and angry at his ignorance, but she still continued to explain. "Dong Shuai, Junko didn't mean that. I mean it's dark outside, I will be scared. It's better to let me rest in the Yang family manor for a night. It won't be too late to continue tomorrow." "You want to go back to the Yang family manor with me? It's just that my 2 wives are in the manor. I'm afraid it's not easy to explain." Yang Chendong saw that the little white rabbit had entered the wolf's den, and while he was very proud, he pretended to be very embarrassed and said. Hearing that he was comparing her with his wives, Junko was angry. "Who do you think I am to you? Moreover, it was disgraceful to be a concubine as a princess." But thinking that she needed his help, she had to pull a long face and said in a provocative tone. "What's wrong? The elegant and talented Dong Shuai is actually so afraid of his wife?" "Not afraid." Yang Chendong shook his head. "It's respect. Forget it, it's really dark outside. It's really inappropriate to leave a little girl like you here. Then come back to the manor with me. But remember, you have to leave after breakfast tomorrow morning. Do you understand?" Seeing that Yang Chendong agreed, Junko didn't have any psychological burden to stay in the Yang family manor for a night. She quickly nodded. "Okay, I'll stay for a night." Chapter 241. Junko's appearance at the moment was very cute, her big eyes sparkling. After Yang Chendong saw it, he secretly praised her in his heart and nodded. Okay, it's a deal. The carriage had no intention of stopping. Without any other orders from Yang Chendong, the large group of people smoothly entered the Yang village. As soon as they entered the village, Yang Chendong took the initiative to get off the carriage. Under the escort of Beta Persei, Yang Wu, and Chiu Vi, they went straight to the inner courtyard. Junko and Kobayashi were arranged to stay in the guest room in the outer courtyard. When Junko arrived at this new place, she was a little curious. However, because she had just been frightened and the sky was already dark, she felt tired. After entering the guest room, she simply washed her face and went to sleep. Soon, she fell asleep. Kobayashi was a lot more alert. Although he fell on the bed, his sixth senses were not closed. But no one had any ideas about him, so his caution was unnecessary. In the study of the inner courtyard of the Yang village, Tiger's man had rushed back. He and the people of the 5 cities warden's office had dealt with the bodies of the killers. After finding out that the killers were actually Japanese warriors, they had already reported it. The next step was handed over to the Genie Guards and the East Faction Guards to take over. They just needed to wait for the news. Good, you did a good job. It's already late. Except for the ones on duty, everyone else should go to rest. By the way, don't forget tomorrow morning's morning exercise. Not only can you not stop, but you also have to make a noise, understand? Yang Chendong patted Tiger's man's shoulder, and after thanking everyone for their hard work, he made some arrangements for tomorrow morning. After taking care of business, Yang Chendong returned to his bedroom. First Madam Hu Yen and second Madam Chiao Yin were already waiting for him. As soon as he entered the room, the two of them eagerly stepped forward to help him take off his clothes with great enthusiasm. Yang Chendong stood there and enjoyed the service of the beauties. After his coat was taken off, Hu Yan's careful voice sounded in his ear. Roku, I heard that the Japanese girl named Junko was brought back to the village by you, right? Hee, that's right. She was being hunted down tonight. My husband happened to pass by and saved her. Yang Chendong chuckled as he replied. How could he not know what Hu Yen and Chiao Yin were thinking? However, now was not the time to explain too much. He wasn't 100% sure how things would develop, and he wouldn't say anything if he wasn't sure. Hu Yen and Chiao Yin were clearly not satisfied with his nonchalant answer. However, as a married woman, she couldn't say much. On the day they married Yang Chendong, they were already prepared to share it with others. After all, their husband was too outstanding. Such a person was destined to be extraordinary. Rather than having the time to be jealous here, she might as well take this opportunity to give birth to a child for him. This way, she would have no worries for the rest of her life and would not have to worry about anything. Lu Lang, let us sisters serve you while you rest. After making up their minds, Hu Yen and Chiao Yin looked at each other and made a decision. Both of them began to lean toward Yang Chendong. Ah, good, then let's rest together. Yang Chendong was happy to see this. While laughing, he held the two women in his arms and then rolled to the side of the big bed. Compared to Yang Chendong's happy life, Aokiyuki's was much more miserable. First, when he learned that Princess Junko had appeared in the Great Ming Dynasty, he was nervous and sent his guard, Ikari, to take action with ninjas and samurai. Originally, he thought that he would succeed. But who would have thought that not long ago, Ikari came back and said that he had failed? And this was not the most annoying thing. Then, the people of the embroidered uniform guard came and asked Aokiyuki to follow them to the yamen on the grounds of assisting in the investigation. Although he had not been in the Great Ming Dynasty for long, he still had some understanding of the yamen of the embroidered uniform guard, which was the imperial court. Of course, Aokiyuki refused. He even used the reason that he was an envoy of Japan to protest and oppose. If it was in the future, an envoy of a country would never be easily touched. Even if there was conclusive evidence, it would still need to be approved layer by layer. In the end, it was unknown when it would be done. But now, the Great Ming Dynasty was still prosperous, and Japan was relatively weak. Of course, Aokiyuki's protest would have no effect. Under the suppression of several burly embroidered uniform guard, he was quickly taken out, leaving the guard, Ikari, who was constantly stomping his feet. It was late at night, and he did not have any better ideas. He could only think about bringing a large sum of money to the officials of the Ministry of Rights at dawn to see how to save his superior. But he did not know that the reason why the embroidered uniform guard acted so quickly was because the matter involved Yang Chendong. The name of the Duke of Loyalty was not only among the common people, but also among the people, the 5 cities' warden's office, and even the embroidered uniform guard. Just a while ago, because they offended this person, many eunuchs were threatened with their lives. Now that this matter was related to him, no one dared to take it lightly. At least, they had to take the suspect into custody first. They could not give the Duke of Loyalty a chance to flip out. As for the Ministry of Rights, needless to say, Hu Yan's grandfather was the minister of the Ministry of Rights. If the people there dared to do anything, it would be a strange thing. Of course, Ikari did not know all of this. He was waiting for the arrival of dawn in nervousness and apprehension. After the night, it was dawn. This was a truth that had never changed. When the sun of the new day shone into the room, Junko woke up. But just as she woke up, she saw 2 maidservants serving her in her line of sight. "Miss, get up. Wash up first." In an unfamiliar environment, Junko, who had no opinion of her own, said obediently. Then, she had the opportunity to enjoy the new toothpaste and toothbrush for the first time. Then it was the appearance of the soap. The fresh fragrance made Junko yearn for it. After washing her face and rinsing her mouth, the divine mirror appeared. The clear mirror reflected the most perfect side of Junko. Then came the new shampoo, the unforgettable perfume spray, and so on. Even the toilet paper was so soft. Junko was completely dumbfounded by all this. Originally, she thought that the life in the palace was luxurious enough. But compared with here, there was still a huge gap. The clothes were very fitting. Among them, there was a shameful bra and other things. Wearing it was comfortable and showed off her figure. It could be said that it was an eye-opener for Junko. She felt that her whole person was completely changed. Along with the arrival of breakfast, the delicious food made Junko eat until she was full. She felt that the amount of food she had eaten in a day was not as much as the amount of food she had eaten today. She changed her clothes and ate until she was full. With a satisfied mood, Junko walked out of the room and came to the courtyard. Then, she saw a scene that she would never forget for the rest of her life. 30 men wearing camouflage uniforms were waving shiny bayonets to practice assassination in the slightly cold morning weather. Their uniform movements made the 30 people's performance seem as if they were one person. Their performance was so uniform that it was as if they were one. But what was even more shocking was that the moment these people rushed out with their bayonets, they didn't make the slightest sound. Because of this, it gave people a terrible feeling. Whether it was practicing formations or weapons, they had to shout. Only in this way could they show their momentum. But these 30 people were doing the opposite. They didn't make the slightest sound during their training. That dull feeling made people couldn't help but give birth to a sense of oppression. It was this feeling that made Junko's chest feel tight and even suffocated. In the distance, the loyal Duke Yang Chendong, who was wearing a vest, was running quickly with more than a dozen people. This scene also made Junko, who was wrapped in a coat, surprised. One must know that the new year was coming, and the weather was cold. Ordinary people couldn't wait to hide their hands and feet in a robe. But how could he wear so little? Not only Yang Chendong, but even the men around him were wearing the same clothes. They all exposed their arms and legs and ran behind Yang Chendong. Among the crowd, Junko also saw her guard captain, Xiao Lin. Xiao Lin was also in the team, and he was also wearing thin clothes. Although he didn't expose his arms and legs like Yang Chendong, he was only wearing underwear. More importantly, he was running at the back of the team. Looking at him, he seemed to be panting to the point of exhaustion. Junko had some understanding of Xiao Lin's physical fitness. He was one of the best among the royal guards, but now he was at the very back of the team. He was 7 or 8 body positions behind Yang Chendong. This was something that no one dared to imagine. But now, everything was really happening. Junko covered her mouth with her hands in horror. At this moment, she was really shocked. At the same time, Shaolin was also shocked. As a guard of the Japanese imperial family, and one of the best, Shaolin was somewhat conceited. It was difficult for ordinary people to enter his eyes. This proud personality made him walk around the village after waking up in the morning. This behavior was naturally stopped by the patrolling Lung Feng. As a warrior, if there was a disagreement, a fight would break out. In a 1-against-2 battle, Shaolin bravely fought the two Lung brothers. In his opinion, it should be easy for him to defeat his opponents, but it took him half a cup of tea's time to defeat the two. At this moment, the other Lung Feng had already surrounded the place, which attracted the attention of the tallest man beside Yang Chendong, Beta Persei, who also rushed over. In a 1-against-2 battle, Shaolin still won. This made the other Lung Feng feel a kind of shame. They all rubbed their hands, wanting to fight to regain their face. Beta Persei, who was better at fighting, saw that Shaolin won because of his strange and flexible movements. This might be the advantage of ninjas, that young master said. Chapter 242. His nimble movements often prevented the Lung Feng's close-range attacks from touching him. How were they going to fight this battle? Of course, this did not mean that the Lung Feng would not be Shaolin's opponent in a real fight. If they fought with their lives on the line, as long as one of them kept the opponent occupied, they could still create an opportunity for the other comrade to kill. Not to mention, when they fought with their lives on the line, would Shaolin be able to pass through the rain of bullets and reach Lung Feng? But no matter what, Shaolin had won. Beta Persei took a big step forward. "You're not bad, but I don't know if you dare to fight me. Of course, you've just fought and wasted some energy. To be fair, how about I let you use my left hand?" Beta Persei stood up and offered to use his left hand to fight Shaolin. This was an insult to a samurai. Shaolin would not back down. For the sake of a samurai's dignity, he readily agreed. The surrounding Lung Feng quickly moved aside, creating a large circle for the two of them to fight. When the two of them stood still, Shaolin made his move. He took a step forward and appeared behind Beta Persei. Then he threw a 1-inch punch at Beta Persei's waist. The speed of this attack was several times faster than when he was fighting against Cold Edge. This time, the other Cold Edge members who were watching the show sucked in a breath of cold air. At this moment, everyone realized that Shaolin had not used his full strength. Beta Persei stood there motionless, as if he did not notice Shaolin's attack. Only when the opponent's 1-inch punch was about to hit his waist and the distance was less than 15 centimeters, did he suddenly turn around and use his right elbow to block the 1-inch punch. Under Beta Persei's sudden counterattack, Shaolin only saw a blur in front of his eyes. Then he felt a sharp pain in his right fist. It felt as if he had hit a piece of iron. The strong rebound force forced him to take 3 steps back before he could regain his footing. Just as he regained his footing, a heart-piercing kick was aimed at his chest. Instinctively, Shaolin stretched out his fists to block, but his expression changed drastically upon contact. The power of this kick was so great that Shaolin couldn't block it even after using all of his strength. After being kicked, he flew backward until he flew for about 7 or 8 steps before landing on the ground with a loud crash. With just an elbow and a kick, Shaolin was sent sprawling on the ground. This scene naturally caused the other Lung Feng members to cheer loudly. Shaolin, who had been knocked to the ground, endured the pain from his arm and slowly stood up. "You're just relying on your tall stature and strength. If we're competing in patience, you're definitely no match for me. You want to compete in endurance? Then why don't we run? I think this is a way to show off our endurance, right?" A voice that wasn't very loud, but just loud enough for everyone present to hear clearly rang out. Listening to the voice, everyone saw Yang Chendong, who was wearing a vest and shorts, walking over with Tiger's Mane, Yang Si, Yang Wu, Yang Lu, Chiu Vi, and other members of the first guard team. "Hello, young master." As soon as Yang Chendong appeared, all the Lung Feng members stepped forward to greet him, and they all stood up straight, looking very energetic. "Good morning, everyone." Yang Chendong said to everyone with a smile, then walked to Xiao Lin's side. If you want to compete in endurance, this young master is going to run now. You can try to keep up with me. As long as you can surpass us, it proves that you are stronger. How about it? Hearing that there is going to be a running competition, and it was Loyal Gong who took the initiative to mention it, Xiao Lin was immediately overjoyed. In the past, when ninja training, the requirements for speed are very strict, and there are also extremely strict requirements for endurance, so running is also a common thing. Now that someone is competing with him in this direction, he won't be polite. He immediately agreed. Okay, I hope that Loyal Gong won't act shamelessly when you lose. Don't act shamelessly. Remember, if you really lose, you have to admit your shortcomings, ha. Yang Chendong, who looked up to the sky and laughed, said to Xiao Lin, then he took big strides and began his morning run. Except for Lung Feng, who needs to train assassination, the other brothers followed Yang Chendong and began to run all the way. It's not accurate to say that they are running. It's far less specific than running. Because there was no intention of slowing down from the beginning, Yang Chendong, who took the lead, took big strides and accelerated his speed. Xiao Lin is indeed a little uncomfortable with Yang Chendong's running method. But he is not afraid. In his view, this is just Loyal Gong trying to show off, trying to pull away from him and make him completely lose confidence. And as long as he can keep up with the other party's pace and rhythm, the other party will be powerless in the later stage, and at that time, it will be time for him to overtake. With this thought and confidence, Xiao Lin also shook off his arms and took big strides to keep up. And this time, he ran a full 6 laps. Each lap is 400 meters, and 6 laps is a distance of nearly 5 miles. His footsteps have been maintained at a constant speed, and Xiao Lin, who followed behind, did not notice that Loyal Gong is tired. This development is completely different from what he imagined. Xiao Lin used all his strength to keep up, and began to take off his clothes. Originally, because of the weather, he was tightly wrapped, but now he began to take off his coat. After a while, only his underwear was left on his body. But even so, he still felt hot. The most important thing is that the distance between him and Yang Chendong is getting farther and farther. After another 6 laps, he has already run 5 kilometers. Xiao Lin felt that he has reached his limit, but when he looked at Yang Chendong, his expression still didn't change and his footsteps were still light. At this moment, if Xiao Lin doesn't know how powerful Yang Chendong is, then all his years of learning martial arts are in vain. At this moment, his heart gave birth to the idea of admitting defeat. And at this time, Junko appeared and saw this scene in front of her. The appearance of the goddess in Xiao Lin's heart seemed to have suddenly poured strength into him. His legs, which were originally as heavy as iron and lead, regained their strength. He began to exert his strength to chase, and he actually overtook the 2 guards. Yang Chendong, who was running in front, felt the change behind him. The corner of his mouth just smiled slightly, and then he also began to accelerate. The moment he exerted his strength, Xiao Lin, who saw a glimmer of hope, was left behind by 7 or 8 meters. The distance between the 2 sides continued to increase, and finally, Xiao Lin couldn't see any hope. At this moment, he knew that he was defeated, completely defeated. When a person's heart has no hope and fighting spirit, sleepiness and fatigue will all surge into the body. Xiao Lin, who felt that his feet were getting heavier and heavier, finally insisted on running half a lap, and finally fell to the ground with a plop, unable to stand up. After Xiao Lin fell, a guard quickly came forward and helped him up. Then a big bowl of steaming meat soup was sent to his mouth, and he was poured into his mouth. After a while, Xiao Lin exhaled a mouthful of turbid air and opened his eyes again. He's fine. Send him to rest first, and at the same time, give him a nutritious meal. After seeing Xiao Lin open his eyes again, the expression on an experienced guard's face relaxed, and then he gave his suggestion to the other guards. Xiao Lin was carried away, and on the other side, Yang Chendong also finished running 10 kilometers with his brothers. After stopping, they didn't immediately rest. Instead, they did all kinds of exercises such as kicking, bending, boxing, jumping. Junko didn't know whether it was because of an illusion or some other reason, but she kept feeling that Yang Chendong's body was as light as a swallow at this moment. After a stick of incense worth of exercise, Yang Chendong ordered, "Go take a bath first, then we'll have dinner." Immediately, everyone dispersed and went to the bathhouse in the outer courtyard of Yangjia village. When everyone passed by Junko, no one even looked at her, as if she was nothing but air. If it was before, Junko, who was usually ignored by others, would definitely be annoyed and embarrassed. But now, she couldn't get angry at all, because at this time, Yang Chendong came to her side. "I'm sorry, your guard is too competitive, so I taught him a little lesson. But don't worry, he will be fine. After this training, he will only become stronger. By the way, I'm also sweaty, so I need to take a bath first. And, do you want to join me?" When he said the last sentence, Yang Chendong's eyes had a trace of a naughty smile. Junko, who was teased by his words, immediately blushed and quickly lowered her head. After a long time, she said, "Who wants to take a bath with you?" After saying this, when she looked up, she found that Yang Chendong had already disappeared, only leaving a heavy masculine scent in the air. But for some reason, Junko didn't feel a trace of disgust, and the appearance of Yang Chendong's strong body when he was running just now flashed in her mind. In just one morning, she had seen too many things that she had never seen before. Not to mention the countless strange things, even her guard captain, Kobayashi, was called a weakling by Yang Chendong's words. All of this subverted Junko's previous understanding, making her curious about the Yangjia village. "I'm going to stay here and see what secrets there are." It was as if he had made a big decision and found a reasonable excuse for himself to stay. After stomping her feet, Junko turned and walked into the courtyard. When Junko came here, all the people who had just been training had changed into new clothes and were eating meat and drinking soup. The fragrance was overflowing, making Junko, who had just eaten breakfast, unconsciously felt hungry again. But after all, she was a girl, and she paid great attention to her figure, so this gluttonous person didn't do anything to her. And it was in this crowd that she saw Yang Chendong, who had changed into a green robe. She saw him eating meat and drinking soup with his subordinates. Chapter 243. This was also one of Yang Chendong's habits. Unless there was a major event, he would do his morning exercise as usual and eat with his brothers afterwards. This was an opportunity to improve everyone's relationship. How could he waste it? The dignified Duke of the Great Ming Dynasty actually dined with his servants. How incredible was this in Junko's eyes? At least in her impression, when her father ate, except for major festivals, her mother would sometimes sit with him and accompany him. Generally, he ate alone, which seemed to show his noble status. But when it came to Yang Chendong, everything seemed to have changed. But they seemed to be getting along so well. Could it be that her father's method was wrong? Or was this Yang Chendong originally a different kind of person? Unconsciously, Junko's heart was filled with more and more doubts, which also made her curious about the Yang village. Yang Chendong, who was eating, noticed the changes on Junko's face. Looking at her frowning, gently nodding, and shaking her head, he felt that she was so cute. After a while, he stood up and took the initiative to come to Junko's side. "Miss Junko, I have allowed you to stay here for one night. Now it's already dawn, you should go and see your guards. If there is no problem, it's time for you to leave." "Oh, then I'll go and see little Lin Kuan." She didn't know why, but the closer she was to Yang Chendong, the faster her heart beat. She couldn't figure out the reason, so she turned around in a panic and went straight to the place where little Lin was resting. In little Lin's room, after eating a lot of delicious food, his body was gradually recovering. When he heard the door open and saw Junko appear, little Lin struggled to sit up from the bed. "Prince, you are too tired, don't get up, just lie down." Junko hurriedly came to the bed and sat down on the chair beside little Lin's bed. "Princess, I'm fine. It's just that I ran too fast, so I'm tired. I'll be fine after rest. By the way, when are we leaving here?" Little Lin was afraid that the goddess would look down on him, so he tried to show off. Junko didn't answer little Lin's question, but asked, "Little Lin Kuan, can you tell me your impression of the Yang village?" "Imprint?" Xiao Lin seemed to be seriously considering this question for the first time. He pondered for a moment before answering, "Princess, Yang Village is very mysterious. The people here are also very strong. Their training methods are also very unique." "Very powerful?" Junko seemed to have caught the key point and asked, "How powerful? Compared to my imperial father's guards?" This. Xiao Lin scratched his head. "I don't know since we haven't competed, but it seems that the people here are stronger." "What? Are they more powerful than father's guards?" Junko asked in shock. She had never practiced martial arts before, so she didn't know much about it. But since it was Xiao Lin who said it, it shouldn't be wrong. After all, taking the initiative to slap their own face was not something that a warrior was willing to do. However, he still admitted it. That could only mean one thing, and that was that the people from the Yang village were really strong. How are they compared to Ashikaga Yoshimasa's guards? Junko continued to ask. This was the main point she wanted to know. Compared to the general's guards? They must be stronger. Xiao Lin seriously thought for a moment and then gave a rough answer. As if to increase his persuasiveness, he added, "The people here use advanced firearms that can fire continuously. This is something that the general doesn't have. If they really fight, I'm afraid that he will suffer a great loss." "So powerful!" Junko exclaimed again. This time, there was a trace of joy on her face. If everything was as Xiao Lin said, then once she drew Yang Chendong to her side, it was equivalent to having the strength to deal with the general. In that case, her imperial father wouldn't be so threatened. At this moment, Junko made a decision in her heart. That was to subdue Yang Chendong and make him work for her. If this was the case, her trip to the great Ming dynasty would be worthwhile. "Xiao Lin Kun, your body is still very weak. How about this, you stay here for 2 days. I will explain it to Dong Shuai." Since he wanted to stay, he needed a valid reason. Xiao Lin's physical condition was the best excuse he could come up with. "Princess, Xiao Lin can continue to walk without rest. I can also protect Princess's safety." Xiao Lin didn't understand these things. He just didn't want to admit defeat. "Enough." Junko suddenly stopped Xiao Lin. "I said that your body is weak and you need to rest. Are you going to disobey my order?" Xiao Lin was caught off guard by the sudden change in the princess, who had a gentle expression on her face just a moment ago. But the education he received since childhood made him instinctively agree. This lowly one doesn't dare to disobey Princess's order. "Very good, since that's the case, do as I say." Seeing Xiao Lin yield, Junko's face reappeared with satisfaction. Then she walked out of the room and went out of the courtyard to look for Yang Chendong. At this time, Yang Chendong had already eaten breakfast and was in his study looking at the various materials sent by the Intelligence Bureau. Hu Yen and Xiaoyin were attending to him on his left and right. The three of them were chatting and laughing, and it was truly a scene full of spring. But in this kind of atmosphere, Tiger's Mane suddenly knocked on the door and said, "Young master, Miss Junko wants to see you." "She hasn't left yet?" "Well, let her come in." Yang Chendong was well aware of this, but his face showed a puzzled expression, as if he was surprised by this result. On the other hand, Hu Yen and Xiao Yin couldn't help but look at him, but then they smiled like flowers. They didn't have the slightest intention to be angry. After Tiger's Mane got approval, he led Junko into the study. As she entered, the 6 eyes of the 3 women unconsciously collided with each other. This was the first time the 3 women met. Their eyes seemed ordinary, but in fact, they were filled with jealousy. Speaking of which, the 3 women were extremely beautiful women. It could be said that each of them had their own merits. Hu Yen was beautiful, Xiao Yin was full of charm, and Junko was cute and moving. Any man who could have one of them was already a blessing that he had done countless good deeds in his previous life. But when the 3 women were together with the same man, it was really like the old saying, the most difficult thing to bear was the beauty's favor. After a short exchange of glances, the 3 women separated. Hu Yen was holding a teacup, while Xiao Yin was pouring tea to express their close relationship with Yang Chendong. Only Junko was left standing there alone, seemingly a little embarrassed. With Junko's identity and the treatment she had received before, she should turn around and leave at this moment. She was the dream lover of many men. Why would she need to fight with other women for a man? But when she thought of all the things she had seen in Yang Village, she finally gave in. She would never forget the words her father said to her when she left Japan, and the eager look in his eyes. How did he promise that he would help his father find a powerful ally? And now, the ally was standing in front of her. If she gave up because of her personality, it would be too stupid. For the sake of her goal and to not disappoint her father, Junko suppressed some of her anger and said to Yang Chendong with a smile, "Dong Shuai, this little girl came to tell you that because the bodyguard's body is too weak, I want to stay for 2 more days. Please help me." On the way here, Junko was thinking about what kind of good words to say to make Yang Chendong let her stay. For this, she had indeed thought of some words to say. But the moment she saw Hu Yen and Xiao Yin, she rejected all of her ideas and took the most direct way. If Yang Chendong was willing to let her stay, it meant that she still had some place in his heart. What she wanted to do next was equivalent to seeing hope. On the other hand, there was no need to say anything. Even if she forced him to stay, it would be difficult to achieve her goal. Wasn't the directness of her words a test of Junko's? She wanted to see what Yang Chendong's true attitude towards her was. Junko's straightforwardness made Yang Chendong, who was sitting behind the desk, feel a little surprised. He had already guessed that since Junko appeared, she would not leave so easily. She would even find all kinds of excuses to stay and ask for help. But he did not expect her to be so direct. This was beyond his expectations. Fortunately, the other party's goal was still the same. They just wanted to stay. This was in line with some of his thoughts. Since she was so straightforward as a girl, there was no need for him to refuse. He immediately nodded and said, "Okay, if that's the case, you can stay for 2 more days." Yang Chendong agreed so readily. When Junko heard it, her face lit up. She did not say any more words of thanks after achieving her goal. She turned around and walked out of the study, leaving Hu Yen and Xiao Yin behind. They seemed a little unhappy. Yang Chendong naturally did not explain too much about why he let Junko stay, what kind of identity she had, and how she would help him in the future. There were many things that he would not say casually before doing it. Otherwise, if Hu Yen and Xiao Yin heard it, they would think that he had lost his mind. Hee, it's going to be the new year soon. Come, let's discuss what we should prepare for the new year. Yang Chendong laughed and hugged Hu Yen and Xiao Yin, using practical actions to divert the 2 women's attention. This move was really good. Soon, the 2 women's attention was diverted from the matter of Junko staying. They began to talk about the new year. Chapter 244. It was 1450 AD. The spring festival bell rang and the new year arrived. The Yang family manor was more than twice as lively as last year. The 4 madams gathered around Yang Chendong and smiled happily. The servants, guards, and guards of the Yang family all received recognition from the 6th young master's performance, making them overjoyed. The servants of the manor, Immortal Abode, Heavens Beyond, Yang Bao, and the staff of the Yang family bank all received a big red packet, at least 5 taels of silver. There was no cap on the red packet, making everyone smile. There was a saying, if you have money, you can celebrate the new year every day. Everyone received benefits. Naturally, everyone was amazed by the benefits of the 6th young master, and their hearts became firmer. The first day of the new year passed happily. On the second day of the new year, Yang Chendong sat in a luxurious carriage and began to visit the capital. For example, the brothers and sisters of the Yang family, the Hu family, and some ministers who were on good terms with Yang Chendong had to visit once. Although he was now the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, he was only 20 years old. During such a festive time like the New Year, of course he couldn't put on airs. As a junior, he visited people to build relationships and increase friendships. He was very busy. Because there were too many people who needed to maintain relationships with him, even the eunuchs like Jin Ing in the palace also needed to send a congratulatory gift. This didn't mean that he was afraid of anyone. He just didn't want to give the other party an excuse to find trouble with him. And he was busy until the 7th day of the new year. This was also the day of the opening of the Yang Family Academy. Before the new year, He Wenyuan and the others who came to find trouble with him were so embarrassed that they couldn't show their faces. In particular, the poem, The History of Lion-Eating Shi, was even more amazing. What was worth mentioning was that Yang Chundong actually took the initiative to go to the He residence to find He Wenyuan during the New Year's visit. He gave He Wenyuan the draft of The History of Lion-Eating Shi that he wrote himself. That day, he had said that if He Wenyuan did not lower his head and admit his mistake, the manuscript of The History of Lion-Eating Shi would not be published. But in reality, Yang Chundong didn't do that. With the idea that it was better to squash enmity than keep it alive, he took the initiative to visit He Wenyuan, giving him enough face. This was what it meant to be a good person. Taking advantage of the New Year period, he abandoned his status as a duke and came as a junior. No matter what he did, no one would say anything. Yang Chundong's way of doing things naturally made He Wenyuan endlessly grateful. Now that there was a way out, how could he not take it? Not to mention, he had been troubled by this matter these days. Many great scholars who were interested in the history of Lion-Eating Shi had taken the initiative to find him, saying that they hoped that he could lower his head and get the manuscript. This was another characteristic of literati. Once they encountered a good article, they would definitely want to read it. Otherwise, they would not be able to eat or sleep well. Among these great scholars, some of their identities were not ordinary. In terms of qualifications, they were comparable to He Wenyuan. This was really difficult for He Wenyuan, because he really couldn't lower his head and ask for advice from a young boy. When he was troubled, there was no lively event in the He residence this year during the new year. At this moment, Yang Chundong came and took the initiative to give him a way out by giving him the manuscript of The History of Lion-Eating Shi. How could He Wenyuan give him any face? He personally went out of the door and welcomed Yang Chundong into the main hall with a hearty laugh. This was a handshake and peace. After settling He Wenyuan, the enrollment of the Yang Family Academy was not so stressful, and the preliminary enrollment was completed in just a few days. Not to mention, Yang Chundong was really famous. Originally, he only needed to recruit 50 people, but the number of people who signed up had reached 500. He had no choice but to get them into the academy first, and then select the suitable candidates after the assessment. On the 7th day of the new year, the entrance of the Yang Family Academy next to the Yang Family Manor could be said to be very lively. More than 500 young people stood in groups of 2s and 3s on the spacious square. Among them were young master nobles and young masters who wore silk and satin. There were also some poor people who wore cotton clothes and even had patches on their clothes. The snow began to fall on the 4th day of the new year, and it continued to fall sparsely until last night. 3 consecutive days of heavy snow turned the Yang Family Manor into a white ocean. The branches, roads, and roofs were all covered with a thick layer of snow. Groups of people waiting outside the Yang Family Academy could not help but sigh at the omen of a bountiful year. They all said that today would be a good year, with good weather and a good harvest. At 8 in the morning, when the number of people gathered outside the manor had exceeded 2,000, the Yang Family Manor's gate opened from the inside. A group of mercenaries in camouflage walked out. Behind them was Yang Chundong in a green robe. His steps were steady, and his face was filled with a very amiable smile. Under the protection of Tiger's Mane on the left and Beta Persei on the right, he came forward. The appearance of Yang Chundong made the noisy crowd quickly quiet down. He had this kind of magic. No matter where he appeared, he would always quickly become the focus of attention. At this point, although the contact time was not long, Junko, who was behind Yang Chundong in the crowd, seemed to be used to it. In about half a cup of tea's time, Yang Chundong and his group arrived at the gate of the Yang Family Academy, which made the atmosphere even quieter. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Yang Chundong strode forward and arrived alone at the academy's closed door. Looking at the door with festive couplets pasted on it, Yang Chundong stood still and turned around abruptly, looking at the crowd of outsiders. "Thank you for supporting me so much, and thank you for coming to support me." Later, no matter who it is, whether or not you are selected as a student of the academy, there will be a small gift for you. Yes, young master. Tiger's mane, who was called, nodded in agreement, then turned back and raised his palms and clapped 3 times. After 3 claps, 4 strong men came out of the Yang Family Manners team. They put the boxes in their hands on the ground and opened them. Suddenly, a burst of silver light shone directly into everyone's eyes. 2 boxes, a total of 10,000 taels of silver. This was the small gift Yang Chendong talked about. There were about 2,000 people here, and if it was divided evenly, each person would get 5 taels of silver. For many poor people, this was definitely not a small amount of wealth. 10,000 taels of silver with a wave of his hand immediately caused a burst of astonishment to come out from the crowd. In this regard, Yang Chendong was not surprised at all. He laughed and said, "It's still after the new year, all of this is just a gift from me to everyone. Of course, you can choose not to accept it, but I will never take back what I have given out. If someone doesn't want it, then the others can just divide it." Duke is righteous. Someone in the crowd took the lead and shouted with a sharp voice. Suddenly, this voice attracted countless people to follow and flatter. Ha! With a forthright laugh, Yang Chendong waved his hand, and 10,000 taels of silver were poured out from the wooden box and poured on the ground, piling up a small silver mountain. Each silver was 5 taels of silver, and there were 2,000 taels of silver. It was quite a large scale. With such a gift in hand, the atmosphere at the scene immediately became much more lively. Even Junko, who was in the crowd, couldn't help but blink when she saw this scene. Obviously, her heart was throbbing at this moment. Since she was young, she had learned Han culture under the guidance of others, so she understood the great Ming dynasty better than the average person. Naturally, she knew that 5 taels of silver per person could help an ordinary person a lot and could buy a lot of good things. 10,000 taels of silver, there were not many people in the entire great Ming dynasty who could do this. For the officials, there were even fewer people who dared to take out such a thing in public. Yang Chendong was one of the exceptions, but anyone who knew him didn't know how much his ability to make money was, and this thing was just a drizzle. He Wenyuan and the others in the crowd were also shocked by the scene of Yang Chendong's attack. It was just that, after all, they were officials of the imperial court. As long as they wanted to use the power in their hands, they never lacked money, not to mention that he only had 5 taels of silver in his hands, so they wouldn't be moved by him. On the contrary, they were more interested in Yang Chendong's literary talent and knowledge. After being shocked by the history of lion eating sure, that day, they had been thinking about whether there was any good work that could be written by Yang Chendong, so that they could learn and experience it. With such a thought, He Wenyuan stepped out of the crowd, wearing a thick and warm cotton robe, slowly raised his hands, cupped his fist and said, "Duke Zhongdam, today is a festive day. I don't know if there is any good work for us to admire and learn from?" He Wenyuan asked for a poem. He didn't come to undermine him, but to repay him. Yang Chendong took the initiative to come to give him a New Year's greeting and the manuscript of History of Lion Eating Sure, so he finally had a way out and didn't have to be forced by other people. Because of this, it was necessary to come this time to support the opening of the academy, and asking for a poem was the most common way for scholars to communicate with each other. Just by using the words admire and learn, he had already raised Yang Chendong's position very high. I don't dare, I don't dare. Yang Chendong was gratified by He Wenyuan's reciprocation, but his mouth was very polite and his face was extremely humble. The so-called good poem needs the accumulation of inspiration and knowledge. How can I compare with Sir He in this aspect? I'm ashamed, I'm ashamed. Ah, Duke Zhongdan, why are you so polite? I know that with your talent, it is not a problem to write a poem. Besides, today is a good day for the opening of the Yang Academy. As the first teacher, writing a poem is something that should be done. He Wenyuan laughed, and his tone was full of relaxation. He was also telling Yang Chendong that on such a good day, how could there only be money and not good poems? Wasn't this a disrespect to scholars? Chapter 245. Of course, on the other hand, it could also be said that he Wenyuan was creating more opportunities for Yang Chendong to become famous. This time, in order to open the academy, Yang Chendong had spent a lot of money to invite some great scholars. Although they were rejected everywhere, there were still people who agreed to come to the Yang family's academy to be teachers for money and a better life. However, there would always be differences between teachers. For example, Yang Chendong himself considered himself to be the chief teacher. Even if he was the chief teacher, how could he not perform at all in such a situation? That's right, that's right. Many others chimed in at this moment. Some of them might be looking for a lively scene, while others wanted to see Yang Chendong make a fool of himself. Of course, there were also some who wanted to listen to a good article that could shake the ancients and dazzle the contemporaries to comfort themselves. With so many people chiming in just a short while, the 2,000 people in the crowd spoke out in unison, all of them requesting Yang Chendong, the chief teacher cum dean, to come up with a new poem to boost their prestige. With so many people having such a request, Yang Chendong knew that he had to come up with something. In fact, he really wanted to show off his skills. Because he had refuted He Wenyuan and the others before, he had made a name that he was not to be trifled with. But in fact, among the scholars, there were still many who looked down on him. They always thought that a young boy would not have much real talent and strength. The so-called academy was just a way to gain fame. In response to these discussions, the Security Bureau reported many people, but Yang Chendong did not intend to make a fuss about it. This was not because he was broad-minded, but because he knew that the most difficult thing for a person to change was their attitude and perception. Even if he took action to deal with 1 or 2 people, it would not have any effect on the overall situation. Since that was the case, it was better to just let it be and let time and facts make the final decision. However, in the process, Yang Chendong would continue to work hard to change the mentality of the people of the Great Ming Dynasty, the way they looked at things and the way they did things. The premise to accomplish all this was to ensure that he himself was the strongest. Good poetry was also a kind of weapon. It was a sharp weapon that was specifically targeted at scholars. It made them feel ashamed of their inferiority and slowly gained their recognition. Now that the Yang Chendong Academy was about to open for business, He Wenyuan and the others had the same idea. Yang Chendong decided to satisfy them. In his mind, he began to flip through the famous poems that he had read in his previous life. When he saw the pure white snow around him, he nodded lightly and had a thought. Speaking of the grandeur of a poem that was about snow, it had to be the great man's Spring in Qin Garden, Snow. Yang Chendong's heart was filled with gratitude for the legacy left to him by the great man of his generation. He gently lifted his green robe, looked up at the sky, and concentrated his qi in his danton. He then said with a powerful voice, Yang Family Village, Snow. The scenery of the northern kingdom was magnificent. Thousands of miles were covered in ice, and tens of thousands of miles of snow fluttered about. Looking inside and outside the Great Wall, there was only the boundless expanse of the great river. The mountain dances like a silver snake, the plains like a wax elephant, wanting to compete with the Heaven Duke. Su Qing was dressed in red and white, looking exceptionally enchanting. There were so many beauties in the country, attracting countless heroes to bow down to them. Emperor Shi Qin, Han Wu, was slightly inferior in literary talent. Tang Sect, Song Zhu, was slightly inferior in style. Genghis Khan, the heavenly son of a generation, only knew how to shoot a big eagle with a bow. The past is the past. Counting the heroes, it depends on the present. The clear voice was still resounding between heaven and earth, but at this moment, the noisy crowd had already become silent. Everyone was silent at this moment. Anyone who knew a little about poetry could feel the grandeur of the poem, Yang Family Village, Snow, and the courage of the ambition. Even those who didn't know about poetry were shocked by the powerful momentum of Yang Chendong's recitation. They didn't dare to make a sound. Junko was also in the crowd. With her understanding of Chinese, she could naturally understand the poem, Yang Family Village, Snow. Because she understood it, she was very surprised. She couldn't imagine that such a sentimental and majestic poem would come from the mouth of Yang Chendong, who was only 20 years old. In the front row of the crowd, He Wenyuan and other great scholars' representatives were trembling with excitement at this moment. They knew more about poetry than others. Because of this, they could understand the role and meaning of this poem in the first place. If the previous History of the Lion Eating the Sure Family was a work of trickery and was created with enough understanding of Chinese characters, then Yang Family Village, Snow, showed a kind of broad feeling and a kind of lofty ambition. The past is the past. Counting the heroes, it depends on the three words, the past is the past, in the present. The words were full of endless meaning, and it was a wonderful finishing touch. The history of the feudal society in China was briefly mentioned, and it turned to the present era of the poet, pointing out the theme of counting the heroes. It depends on the present era. The present era was a new era, and the new era needed new heroes to lead it. The heroes of the present era lived up to the mission of history and surpassed the heroes in history. They had more outstanding talents and would create unprecedented great achievements. This was the poet's firm self-confidence and great ambition. This conclusion, which shocked the ages, made a declaration that surpassed history and expressed the ambition to change the world. At that moment he thought for thousands of years. At that moment he saw the future. At that moment he was full of lofty sentiments. At that moment he looked down on the past and present. The entire poem reflected a kind of broad-mindedness and arrogance. Every sentence carried an extremely deep meaning. Once one carefully pondered over it, every word was like a jewel, and every sentence was full of fine sentences. At this moment He Wenyuan was completely convinced. The poem Yang Family Village, Snow, had completely conquered him. Convinced, he was the first to applaud. Good poem, good mood, good mind. Loyal and courageous, your talent is admirable. He even said the word admirable. It could be seen that at this time, He Wenyuan was really impressed by Yang Chendong's talent. With him as an example, the other literati also nodded their heads and congratulated Yang Chendong with their fists clasped in front of him. With the literati taking the lead, the others naturally followed to congratulate. Yang Chendong smiled and cupped his fists to everyone. He knew that the two consecutive styles were very successful. Next, he would see the real academy. He turned around and suddenly stretched out his hands. His fists turned into palms and pushed the door of the Yang Family Academy behind him. With this sudden force, the originally heavy door opened from the outside. With a creaking sound, the two iron blocks on the left and right of the Yang Family Academy's door appeared in front of everyone. It was not correct to say that it was two iron blocks. Although it was iron, it had a round iron body and a long iron handle. It was like a machine in front of everyone. At this moment, behind Yang Chendong, He Wenyuan and the others also walked over. They also noticed the two big iron blocks with a cement base. Out of curiosity, everyone stopped and looked at the rare thing in front of them. They were speechless for a while. Yang Chendong had brought too many rare things to everyone. At this point, they were no longer as shocked as they were at the beginning. Therefore, at this moment, everyone's eyes fell on the Duke of Loyalty, wanting to see how he would explain this thing. Someone, bring me the basin. Yang Chendong, who was chuckling, strode forward and came to the side of the iron block. He reached out and grabbed the iron handle. Then, his arm slowly pressed down. Fall, rise, fall. The rhythm was even and slow. When Tiger's Mane took out a basin and placed it on one end of the iron block, clean water came out from it and fell into the basin like the Milky Way. It's working. The people closest to it saw it the most clearly. When they saw the water flowing out, they couldn't help but take a step back and then let out a scream. There was no need to shout. Everyone noticed that there was a lot of clear water flowing out. For a moment, everyone was surprised. They were obviously very curious about the iron thing that could work after a few moves. Some of the people in the crowd who had done farm work even widened their eyes. They suddenly thought that if they had this kind of thing in the land they planted, wouldn't they not be afraid of drought? Yes, this is a water pressure well, a tool to draw water from the ground. The water pressure well is a tool to draw underground water to the ground. It is made of cast iron and the bottom is a cement-like block. The head of the well is the water outlet. The back of the well is thick and thin. The tail is a pressure handle connected to the heart of the well. It is about 20 to 30 centimeters long. It is often used, making it brighter. The heart of the well is a water guide skin. It is the force of this water guide skin and the heart of the well that draws the underground water up. The principle is not complicated. It's just that because of the backwardness of science and technology, no one has studied physics. Everyone wants to learn from the sage and Confucius. Naturally, they have no time to care about other things. This is the water pressure well. It can draw underground water up to a few meters deep, or even a dozen meters deep, to the ground through this method. With such a thing, people don't need to go to the river or the well to draw water in the future. They only need to install such a thing in the small courtyard to solve the problem of drinking water. When this thing is placed in the field, the problem of drought will be solved. Looking at the eyes focused on him, Yang Chendong's words were powerful and resonating, shaking the eardrums of everyone present. Is it really so magical? Quick, who is going to try the other one and see if it can really draw water? He Wenyuan was also shocked by Yang Chendong's introduction. He remembered that there was a well in his courtyard. Usually, water was taken from there. However, there would often be dirty things falling on it. For the sake of cleanliness, it naturally needed someone to take care of it. However, there was no guarantee that the water was clean. But now, there was such a thing that could make water appear on the spot. It was really convenient and much more hygienic. When He Wenyuan shouted, someone had already walked over. He reached out and pressed the iron handle of the water pressure well. After more than 10 times, water began to flow out of the iron mouth. Some people couldn't help but curiously go forward to have a taste. They immediately shouted excitedly, "So cool, so sweet." Chapter 246. Quick, let's go and have a taste. Hearing this, the crowd immediately became restless. Then, one by one, they crowded forward, wanting to try this new thing. Even Yang Chendong was pushed to the side because there were too many people rushing up. The attraction of the 2 pressurized water wells was beyond Yang Chendong's expectations. After all, water was an indispensable part of the human body, so it was easier to arouse people's concern. After a full hour, the crowd's interest in the pressurized water wells was not as great. In the courtyard of the Yang Family Academy, 10 tables had already been set up. Because there were too many people, this was for the preliminary examination. The 500 people would be reduced to at least 4/5, which meant that only 100 people would be left. Even if it was 100 people, perhaps only half of them would be left. The 1-to-5 ratio in the preliminary examination made many people eager to try, thinking about how to enter the academy. One had to know that once one entered this place, not only would no one collect tuition fees, on the contrary, they would also take care of your 3 meals a day. For some poor people, they could learn knowledge without spending any money. It was a good thing that they could not ask for. The so-called preliminary examination was actually just filling in a form. For those who were illiterate, there would be someone who would explain it to them. In the end, they just had to act according to what they thought. The whole process of filling in the form was not complicated. In just 2 hours, the work of more than 500 people was completed. Next was the tour of the Yang Family Academy. The spacious and bright classroom, the new tables and chairs, as well as the erasable blackboard and chalk, once again became the focus of everyone's eyes. The tour lasted all the way until noon. Only then did people leave in 2s and 3s. Yang Chendong had already said that the results would be announced in 2 days. Who could enter the Yang Family Academy to study would be announced at that time. More than 2,000 people left with a satisfied expression. For many people, there was no need for this trip today. After hearing such a majestic poem and seeing many new things, it was enough for them to brag and show off to others. He Wenyuan also left. Before he left, he even politely told Yang Chendong that if there was a shortage of teachers in the academy and he happened to be off duty, he would be willing to help for free. With regards to He Wenyuan's initiative to express goodwill, Yang Chendong naturally smiled and agreed. However, Only he knew in his heart that what he was teaching was not the flashy 4 books and 5 classics. He was teaching the way of survival. This was also a preparation for accumulating talents in the future. After everyone left, the area outside the Yang Manor became quiet again. However, Yang Chendong had no intention of resting at all. In his hands, he was holding the information added by the applicants and was checking them one by one. The Security Bureau was already on standby and fully cooperating. Once there was a talent that the young master had his eyes on, they would investigate him as quickly as possible and then verify the authenticity of his identity. Although Yang Chendong, who had made a great contribution, had taken the initiative to leave the court, he knew that his contribution was too great, so great that even the emperor had to be wary of him. Now that he had made such a big move, it was impossible for the academy not to be on guard. In fact, the Security Bureau had already found 3 secret agents of the embroidered uniform guard from the applicants. Although they were good at forging identities, in front of the extremely professional Security Bureau, they still revealed their foxtails. Not only were there secret agents of the embroidered uniform guard in the capital, but also spies sent by Zhu Qizhen of the Ying sect, and there were as many as 8 of them. In addition, there were 2 spies sent by Wala Yeshen. Looking at the applicants screened by the Security Bureau, Yang Chendong shook his head and smiled. They really think highly of me. It seems that the young master can't keep a low profile even if he wants to. Of course, in addition to these spies, there were indeed people with good conditions among the applicants. For example, the 4 forms on the table. The first was Wang Si, the grandson of the Minister of Personnel, Wang Ji. He had previously been an editor of the Hanlin Academy and was a 7th-rank official. He was also one of Yang Chendong's friends from a long time ago. Later, when Zhu Qiu had taken over, Jin Ying had once sent people to blackmail Wang Ji. Because she had received very little, she was dissatisfied and removed Wang Si from his position. Although he was later reinstated, this young master no longer cared about official matters and became a frequent guest of the immortal abode. This person had also applied for the Yang Clan Academy. When he saw his name on the table, Yang Chendong pulled him out. After some deep thought, he decided to take him as a student. Yang Chendong had his own considerations for this. His attitude toward the great Ming dynasty was to boil the frog in warm water. In order to achieve this, the prerequisite was that there was enough warm water. He viewed Wang Si as a part of the warm water, and he would be able to influence the young master and young lords. It was even possible that Wang Ji's attitude toward the great Ming dynasty would change. Yang Chendong had been very close to Wang Si for a period of time, so he had a certain understanding of this person. He was very smart and did not have the bad habits of a hedonistic young master. In addition, he was not very old. As long as he was willing to learn, he would be able to achieve great things. The second person he chose was called Feng Ku, a dispirited scholar. When he was young, because he was smart, he had become an elementary scholar early on, allowing him to see the hope of changing his family. He had immersed himself in books, unable to extricate himself. However, people like this often did not excel in anything other than studying. Feng Ku was an example of this. His learning speed was indeed very fast, but he was lacking in contact with others, so he did not have many connections with other scholars. When he was taking the high scholar examination, he was tricked by another elementary scholar. He had stuffed an unimportant note into the bottom of his shoe and brought it into the examination room. Originally, this was just a joke to tease him. However, he did not expect the result to be so dramatic. Feng Ku became an elementary scholar, but the elementary scholar who put the note failed. Out of revenge and jealousy, this person reported this matter to the imperial court. However, because things had changed, there was no way to investigate. However, because of this matter, Feng Ku was not given a position by the imperial court. He only received the status of a high scholar. In addition, his parents had passed away early and he was not good at business. In the end, the fields in his family were sold to buy books. Now, even eating became a problem. This kind of bookworm, no matter where he went, he wouldn't be liked by anyone. However, Yang Chendong knew that this kind of person was more suitable for professional work. For example, the scientists in the future. It was because they had no desires and only had knowledge and science in their eyes that they were able to create many inventions. Accepting this person was to train Feng Ku as a seedling to be a scientist. The third person was called Chang Qianhao. He was from Jiangnan and was the son of the Chang family. Chang Qianhao's family background was very good, and his family background wasn't bad either. His appearance was distinguished and elegant, and the way he conducted himself was very smooth and sly. More importantly, this person had a good hand in calculating accounts, so much so that he was called the divine mathematician. He was chosen by Yang Chendong because he was good at arithmetic. As his business grew bigger, there was a lack of talents in this area. He was going to train this person as a future finance official. Although the Chang family was rich, Yang Chendong did not care about them. He believed that when he gave enough benefits, Chang Qianhao would know how to choose. Not to mention, he was confident that in the process of teaching him, he would completely convince this person. The last person's identity was a bit special. Not only was she a woman, she was also an armed escort. The profession of an armed escort was still very dangerous. After all, there were not so many cameras in ancient times. It was not like where the money trucks were attacked. Usually, there would be a lot of clues. It was because of the lack of information that robberies happened again and again. It also made this profession very risky. Men were not willing to take such a big risk, let alone a woman. However, this woman could choose this profession, which showed how powerful she was. Tai Qingyi, 23 years old, was called Iron Face and Benevolent Heart. Iron Face referred to the woman's serious face. Benevolent Heart referred to her bodhisattva's heart. According to the investigation of the Security Bureau, most of the money this woman earned was given to the poor people. This time, the reason why she wanted to come to the Yang Academy to study was that she lost her hand in the process of delivering an escort. As an armed escort, some people could work for a lifetime, but some people could only do it once. It all depended on her to ensure that the escorts were not lost. Unfortunately, although Tai Qingyi was good at fighting, the number of robbers she encountered was 3 times more than her. She was outnumbered and finally lost her escort, which made her lose her livelihood. She came to the Yang Academy to find a chance to survive and learn more skills. Of course, this had a lot to do with Yang Chendong's reputation outside. Otherwise, it would be difficult for an ordinary scholar to catch the attention of this extraordinary woman. Oh, right, when we were delivering the money in the morning, this woman was the one who shouted for the Duke to be righteous. Yang Chendong suddenly thought of something and said. Then, he laughed heartily and stored this woman's information. Over the next 2 days, the 100 selected students were divided into groups. Some of them still needed to be observed, but some of them had been predetermined due to their various skills and specialties. It was just that they were unaware of it. Currently, the people outside were still waiting for the results in 2 days. The Wang residence in the capital. As the Minister of Personnel for many years, Wang Zhi's influence was not only shown by his position, but also his hidden influence that people did not dare to underestimate. There was a saying in the Ministry of Personnel that the officials were a level higher than the officials, and the recommendation authority was in their hands. This caused some people to think of ways to curry favor with this master. As time passed, the saying that Wang Zhi's disciples were all over the world was no longer an adjective, but a fact. Chapter 247. Wang Zhi was so prestigious, but his most beloved grandson, Wang Si, did not go against his wishes and applied for the Yang Academy. After learning the truth, the minister flew into a rage in his study and called Wang Si and his son over to give them a good scolding. When it came to his grandson, Wang Zhi cared about him more than just love. He hoped that the power of the Wang family could continue, at least not fall, so he always paid attention to the teaching and training of his descendants. All along, Wang Si's performance was reassuring. At such a young age, he was already an editor of the Hanlin Academy and a 7th-rank official. If he was sent out of the capital, he would at least be a county magistrate. But who would have thought that after being suspended from his duties, he no longer had any desire to improve himself when he was reinstated? Not only did he eat and drink every day, he even applied for the Yang Family Academy behind Wang Ji's back. How could Wang Ji not be angry? In the study, Wang Ji knelt on the ground after being reprimanded, but his face was full of dissatisfaction. "Grandfather, didn't you say that the Duke of Loyalty and Courage has a promising future and is very talented? You also said that I should learn from him when I have time. Now that I have applied for the Yang Academy and will become his student, why are you not happy? I am now 27 years old, but I don't feel ashamed because my teacher is younger than me. You don't think that I have disgraced the Wang family because of this, do you?" "Shut up." Hearing his grandson's bluntness, Wang Ji was so angry that his beard curled up. "What do you know? The Duke of Loyalty and Courage is indeed very talented and capable. I don't object to you befriending him and learning from him. But it is completely different to acknowledge him as your teacher. You have also heard of the saying that a teacher for a day is a father for life. This is equivalent to tying you and him together. If one day, when the emperor wants to deal with him, won't you be implicated?" "Implicated? Grandfather, are you saying that the emperor wants to deal with the Duke of Loyalty and Courage?" Wang Si keenly sensed something and asked carefully. "Not now. But can't you see that the Duke of Loyalty and Courage's contributions are too great, so great that his contributions are enough to shake the emperor? Let me ask, which emperor in the world would allow someone with greater contributions than himself to exist? It's only a matter of time before we deal with him." Wang Ji shook his head and said with certainty. What Wang Ji said was not only what he thought, but also what the other officials thought. Everyone almost unanimously thought that the emperor would deal with Duke Zhongdan sooner or later. He didn't make a move now because there were still too many places that needed to be used. However, once the emperor's position was completely stabilized and his strength increased, how could a mountain contain two tigers? It was precisely because of this that many officials did not get too close to Yang Chendong, in case something happened to the loyal and courageous minister in the future. Someone would settle accounts after the autumn and find trouble with them. While everyone was thinking of ways to distance themselves from Yang Chendong, his own grandson had taken him as a teacher. No wonder Wang Ji was so angry. "You haven't done anything to the Duke of Loyalty yet, have you? Besides, your grandson thinks highly of the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. When he first entered the capital, I sensed that he wasn't ordinary. Along the way, the facts have proven this. Even the Walla's army was defeated by him. If His Majesty wants to do anything to him, he probably won't be able to get much out of it. If things go wrong, he might even end up injuring himself. If that's the case, your grandson has walked the right path today, taking the initiative before others." Wang Si didn't think much of his grandfather's words. In truth, with his intelligence, he had already analyzed the situation. After analyzing it, he had come to this decision. He believed that one couldn't put all their eggs in one basket. Otherwise, that would be the easiest way to cause problems. Wang Si's retort left Wang Ji speechless. Only now did he understand that it wasn't that his grandson didn't understand, but that he knew everything, which was why he had come to this decision. "Sire, do you know how risky this is?" "Grandfather, your grandson has thought about it. But as long as your Majesty is still on the throne, the Wang clan will be fine, and your grandson will also be fine. Besides, your grandson isn't the only one taking the Duke of Loyalty as his teacher. If your grandson discovers that the Duke of Loyalty isn't as formidable as you imagined, your Majesty can use your authority to ground your grandson at any time. If that really happens and the matter gets out, even if something happens to him one day, no one will use this matter to make trouble for our Wang clan." Wang Si's frank words left Wang Ji completely dumbfounded. He hadn't expected that his grandson, despite his young age, would be able to think of everything. If that was the case, what was there to worry about? As long as he discovered that Yang Chendong wasn't someone who could accomplish great things, he could bring his grandson back. Not only that, he could also tell the outside world that he had sent his grandson to investigate. If things went well, there was a high chance that this would turn into a great achievement. The worst-case scenario was already bearable. Wang Ji did not try to stop his grandson and agreed to it. Now, he was worried that his grandson would be accepted by Yang Chendong because of his relationship with him. If he couldn't enter the Yang Academy, then all of his thoughts would just be a bubble. This night, not only the Wang clan, but many other people were worried about this problem. Even the commander of the embroidered uniform guard, Lu Gui, who had sent out undercover agents, was worried. Although the 3 agents he sent out didn't seem to have any relationship with the embroidered uniform guard on the surface, it was true. As long as someone investigated carefully, they could still find some clues. If that was the case, wouldn't Yang Chendong think that he was a little girl and come to find trouble with him? For some reason, when he thought of Yang Chendong's strength, Lu Gui's heart was beating like a drum. This person wasn't someone to be trifled with. Furthermore, he never did business at a loss. At least, Lu Gui had never profited from his dealings with him. Lu Gui was still thinking about how to scheme against Yang Chendong. However, he didn't know that he had already been schemed against by someone else. In the prison of the embroidered uniform guard, the former Qianhu of the embroidered uniform guard, Tang Tong, was sitting on a bamboo mat with a depressed expression. Although it was called a bamboo mat, it was already in tatters. There was only a thin layer of it left. At this moment, it was freezing outside, and the imperial prison was also very cold. However, even in such an environment, Tang Tong didn't dare to raise any objections. As a former Qianhu, he knew the rules too well. Many times, if you didn't speak or make a sound, you might suffer less because you were forgotten. However, if you insisted on standing up, these jailers wouldn't care about your previous position when they beat you up. He hugged his knees and sat on the ground. His eyes were listless and spiritless. Even when he heard the approaching footsteps, he didn't raise his head. It's time to eat. It was the jailer who gave out the food. When he walked past Tang Tong's room, a slightly moldy and black steamed bun was thrown out and rolled to his feet. This was Tang Tong's dinner. If it was outside, other than a beggar, it would probably be very difficult to attract anyone's attention. However, in the imperial prison, it was a good thing that could save lives and keep them alive. He was indeed a little hungry, but this black steamed bun really couldn't arouse his appetite. At this moment, he couldn't help but hate his choice. Why did he believe that Jin Ying had to stay in the capital? If he had made another choice at that time and followed Chao Jixiang to Nanjing, perhaps it would have been a different scene. He sighed in his heart and reached out to take the black steamed bun. Then, he put it into his mouth with a hopeless expression. After taking a bite, the gloomy Tang Tong was still regretting his choice. However, after chewing a few times, his expression suddenly froze. Subsequently, his eyes widened as he vigilantly scanned his surroundings. When he saw that no one was paying attention to him, he carefully spat out the steamed bun that he had swallowed into his hands. Then, he saw a small piece of paper that was sandwiched between his hands. There was actually a piece of paper in his steamed bun. From the looks of it, there seemed to be writing on it. Tang Tong's heart thumped. He didn't believe that this was caused by the chef's carelessness. His intuition told him that someone must be sending him a message. But who could send him a message? He was now almost a cripple. Who would think of him? And who would have such great ability to avoid the jailers and bribe them to send him a message? How much power did this person have? With all kinds of questions, Tang Tong carefully opened the paper in his hand. Immediately, 3 lines of small words entered his eyes. At this moment, his breathing began to quicken and soon, his eyes were filled with tears. Duke of Loyalty, it's actually the Duke of Loyalty. Yes, only he would be willing to use silver. He also has so much silver to do whatever he wants in the imperial prison. Thinking so in his heart, he quickly digested the contents of the paper. Not long after, his face began to change greatly. Then, his expression slowly calmed down. After a while, his heartbeat calmed down and his emotions calmed down. Tang Tong put the paper back into his mouth and swallowed it. Then he stood up and held the iron cage with both hands and shouted outside. "Come, I want to see Ji Qian. I have something important to report." Today was the day of the Yang Family Academy's enrollment. In the morning, there were many people gathered outside the Yang family manor. although it couldn't compare to the Xiaocai, High Scholar, and Jinshi. But for many people, if they could enter the Yang Family Academy, it would be a fresh start in their lives. When most people had gathered and the sun slowly rose, a group of people walked out of the Yang family manor. They held a list written in red words in their hands. Under everyone's gaze, they pasted it horizontally at the entrance of the Yang Family Academy. A total of 100 names appeared in front of everyone's eyes. When the list was posted, it immediately attracted many people to rush over and look up at the bottom of the list. There was only a 1/5 acceptance rate, and it was the early acceptance rate. Naturally, most people left with a face full of disappointment. But at the same time, there were some people who were excited. They had been chosen. In the eyes of these people, there were some who were excited, some who were excited, and some who were even arrogant and condescending. Chapter 248. Yongding Gate of the Capital. This gate was one of the closest outer gates of the capital to the Yang village. At this moment, 2 women were surrounded by several burly men. From the looks of it, they were completely surrounded, which attracted many commoners entering and leaving the city to watch. "Big Sister E, it's my fault. I'll stay here. You should leave first. Don't ruin things." The petite woman said to the woman who was clearly half a head taller than her with a face full of grief and indignation. Her face was filled with anxiety and concern. He looked at the tall woman. Although she seemed to be in a hurry, she stood there with her legs like pillars. She didn't seem to have any intention of leaving. "Little Sister Ping, how can Big Sister leave you alone? Besides, didn't you persuade me as well? The Yang Clan Academy and Dong Shui won't accept a girl as a disciple. I have no hope at all. Since that's the case, what difference does it make whether I look at the list or not? On the other hand, Yu Xiong's grandfather is the current Minister of Justice, Yu Shiyue. He's a favorite of the emperor. If I offend him, I'll be in big trouble." The woman who spoke was Tai Qingyi. She used to be an escort and was nicknamed Iron Face Benevolent Heart by the people of the Jianghu. 3 days ago, she applied to the Yang Clan Academy. The girl beside her was called Jiang Ping. She was her sworn sister of the opposite sex. The 2 of them used to be escorts together. Later, Tai Qingyi made a mistake and was fired from the escort agency. She followed her out. In desperation, she thought of applying to the Yang Clan Academy. In the Jianghu, the name of Dong Shui was equally well known. Although they didn't have much hope, they wouldn't lose anything by giving it a try, right? Today was supposed to be the day of the announcement, so the 2 girls were going to the Yang Academy 15 li south of the city to take a look. However, because they were in a hurry, they weren't careful when they walked. Coincidentally, they bumped into Yu Xiong, who was riding a horse at the city gate, and almost frightened his horse. Although they were saved by the Yu family servants, Yu Xiong was a young master and relied on his grandfather's high status and power. How could he suffer such a loss? He immediately demanded compensation from Jiang Ping. Then, when he saw that Jiang Ping and Tai Qingyi were quite pretty, he pestered them even more and refused to let them go. He even ordered his servants to surround them tightly. From the looks of it, he was clearly going to take them away and do something improper. When Tai Qingyi refused to leave, Jiang Ping became even more anxious. She was afraid that she would delay her sister's important matter. When she looked at Yu Xiong, who was riding on the horse with his head held high, she blurted out, "Young Master Yu, please let my sister go first. She has already applied for the Yang Family Academy." This time, she is going to look at the roll of pills. If she delays her important matter, can you bear the consequences? Jiang Ping wanted to use the Dong Shui to suppress Yu Xiong. This was also based on the rules of nobility. After all, whether it was the name of the Dong Shui or the name of the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, it was far from being comparable to a little young master who only knew how to rely on his family. There was nothing wrong with Jiang Ping's strategy, but she neglected a problem. Yu Xiong was a hedonistic young master. When he did things, he would rarely use his brain. If the person in front of him was Yang Chendong, perhaps he would retreat. However, how could the name of the Dong Shui scare him? Not to mention, at home, he had heard his grandfather unintentionally mention that there were still many scholars in the world who were against the Yang family academy. Thus, he was even more fearless. Oh, is that so? Then you are already a member of the Yang family academy? Yu Xiong chuckled and said with a playful expression. Not yet. Jiang Ping shook her head with a very honest attitude. Since you are not, how can you use the name of the Yang family academy? Besides, even if you are really a member of the Yang family academy, you have to give this young master an explanation for startling this young master's horse, right? People always have to be reasonable. Someone come, bring the two of them back. This young master wants to properly interrogate and investigate. A trace of urgency appeared on his face, showing that at this moment, Yu Xiong's brain was already filled with lust and he could not wait any longer. What are you doing? Seeing the numerous Yu family retainers closing in on the two of them, Tai Ching-yi asked with a steely expression. She already had a premonition that something was going to happen, and with her skills, she was not very afraid. However, she was worried that if she really made a move here, in the capital, wouldn't she be committing a crime? If that was the case, there would be no place for her in this vast world. What are we doing? Bring you back. The surrounding Yu family servants, seeing that their young master had given the order, how could they still be polite? Each of them laughed sinisterly and began to walk closer with large strides. These people had been following Yu Xiong for a few years and were very clear about their young master's temperament. Since these two women had been bumped into, they would definitely not be able to escape from the devil's claws. Moreover, not long after, when he was tired of playing with them, he would reward them. Looking at the two of them, the servants could not help but have a good time. 7 to 8 servants surrounded them in a circle. Seeing that they were getting closer and closer, Tai Ching-yi had no choice but to clench her fists in order to protect herself. From the looks of it, it was obvious that a fight was going to break out at any moment. As for what would happen after a fight, it would be a matter of taking one step at a time. The surrounding commoners, seeing that a fight was about to break out, were all worried for the two women. However, their words carried little weight, so they did not dare to act rashly. Otherwise, not only would they not be able to save the two women, they might even get themselves into trouble. However, even if some people were afraid, there were still some who were not. Seeing that the burly servants were about to surround the two women and capture them like eagles catching chicks, a shout came from outside the crowd. Stop! As the voice fell, it attracted the attention of the commoners in the crowd. Then, a man dressed in brocade strode over under the protection of two servants. As he walked, the middle-aged man said with a face full of anger, "In broad daylight, the world is clear and bright, and in the capital, what are you people trying to do? Even if you have broken the law, the yamen will judge. It's not up to you to privately punish, is it?" The man's face was full of righteousness, and his words were reasonable. The servants actually forgot to take action and looked at each other. They were clearly shocked by the man's imposing manner. "Who are you?" Yu Xiong said with an unhappy expression. Just as the prey was about to fall into his hands, a troublemaker suddenly appeared. No one would be in a good mood. "And who are you?" In the face of Yu Xiong's arrogant question, the righteous man smiled. His name, Yang Yang, had spread throughout the capital, and there weren't many people who didn't know his name. It was no wonder he had a playful smile on his face when he ran into a hothead who didn't know his identity. As Yang Chendong's fourth brother, his influence had recently flourished. Anyone who knew his identity, which one of them didn't give him enough face? He had face in front of outsiders, and he could enter and leave the immortal abode whenever he wanted. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, he only needed to say that he was going to pay the bill and he could leave. How comfortable was this kind of life? All of this had been brought about by his sixth brother, and Yang Yang was very clear on this point. It was precisely because of this that he attached great importance to anything related to his sixth brother. When he found out that the Yang clan's academy was opening its enrollment today, he wanted to go and congratulate them. But he hadn't expected to run into such a situation at the city gates. Seeing that Yu Xiong was clearly bullying the weak, Yang Yang felt indignant in his heart. Thus, he shouted loudly and stepped forward. He originally thought that since he had only startled the horse and hadn't injured anyone, the other party would definitely give him face. But unexpectedly, the other party didn't recognize him, and he couldn't help but laugh heartily. This young master is surnamed Yang, the fourth young master of the Yang clan. You'd better remember this well. Yang took the initiative to announce his name, hoping to turn the matter into a small one. Since he had already revealed his identity, as long as the other party knew how to do things properly, they would definitely give him face. In return, he would remember this person and return this favor sooner or later. You're the fourth brother of the East Marshal. We're applying to enter the Yang Clan Academy. We were originally going to look at the rankings today, but we ended up startling the horse in our haste. Fortunately, nothing happened. Jiang Ping was overjoyed when she heard Yang announce his identity. Now that the Yang family had come, it seemed like nothing would happen today. Wait a moment? What do you mean nothing happened? I was so scared that my heart almost jumped out. I must have suffered some internal injuries, so you must come back with me. Once this young master finds a doctor and confirms that I'm fine, I'll let you go. Just when Jiang Ping thought that there was nothing to worry about, Yu Xiong suddenly spoke and used his injury as an excuse to bring Jiang Ping and Tai Qingyi back to the residence. From the beginning to the end, Yu Xiong was talking to Jiang Ping and didn't even look at Yang, as if he was invisible. But in fact, he had his own little plans and ideas. Yang, the fourth young master of the Yang clan, Yang Chendong's fourth elder brother. It was said that they had a good relationship. How could Yu Xiong not have heard of this? But because of the difference in age, the two didn't have much interaction and didn't know each other. Originally, everyone minded their own business. Yang Chendong was powerful and had done a lot of big things in a short period of time. He was seen as a rising star. But how could the Yu clan be bullied so easily? The Minister of Justice was in charge of all punishments in the world. His power was unimaginable. Even if it was Yang Chendong, if he offended the Yu clan, it would be very difficult for him and he would have to be careful. Of course, there was no need to make enemies. Yu Xiong was clear about this. Thinking himself clever, he didn't even look at Yang. Instead, he stared at Jiang Ping and spoke. Chapter 249. When Yang heard from Jiang Ping that they had applied for his sixth brother's Yang Clan Academy, he felt relieved. Since this matter concerned his sixth brother, he had to get involved. However, when he raised his head and saw that Yu Xiong didn't even look at him, he immediately became angry. Brat, this young master is talking to you. Did you hear me? This young master is Yu Xiong. I'm sure fourth young master has heard of me. Today's matter has nothing to do with you, so it's best if you don't interfere. Men, arrest these two women who tried to harm this young master and bring them back for interrogation. Yu Xiong originally didn't want to talk to Yang in order not to cause a conflict between the two clans. However, seeing that the other party didn't recognize him, he immediately revealed his identity and advised him not to meddle in other people's business. Otherwise, he would only be losing face. Although Yu Xiong's words were ear-piercing to Yang's ears, he felt somewhat helpless. He had naturally heard of Yu Xiong's name. After all, there were only a few high-ranking young masters in the capital. As long as one paid attention, they would know a little. As someone who had been in the capital for several decades, how could Yang not know? Usually, everyone really had the idea of minding their own business. But if they really met face to face one day, they would just greet each other and it would be over. This was because the Yu clan wasn't to be trifled with. However, he didn't ask about the other party's identity before stepping forward. Now that he knew the other party's identity, if this matter were to spread, wouldn't people think that he was a person who bullied the weak and feared the strong? More importantly, this matter involved the students of the Yang Clan Academy. Although he didn't know if they were accepted, it was related to his sixth brother. If he shrank back now, it wouldn't be easy for him to deal with his sixth brother. The Yu clan wasn't to be trifled with, but he couldn't ignore this matter either. Thus, Yang was caught in a dilemma. More importantly, if he were to make a move now, he would be at a disadvantage since he only had two servants with him. If he were to be beaten up, even if he managed to regain his face later, it would still be a humiliating matter. Yang Yang was caught in a dilemma and didn't know whether to advance or retreat. For a moment, he didn't say anything. When Yu Xiong saw this, he was naturally overjoyed. Thinking that the other party was afraid of his identity, he became even bolder and shouted at his servants, "What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for?" Since their master had given the order, the 8 servants no longer held back. They surrounded the 2 women and stretched out their arms to grab them. "Sister, what should we do?" Jiang Ping saw that the other party had made a move. If she didn't retaliate, then her power would be tied up tightly. Then, she really didn't know what her fate would be. "Let's do it. Let's fight first and talk later." A look of determination flashed across Tai Chingy's face. She naturally knew what the consequences would be if she fought back. However, he had no other choice at this time. He couldn't just let the other party take action and allow himself to be captured. After Tai Chingy finished speaking, she took half a step back and dodged a big hand in front of her. Then she punched the man's elbow. The strong and precise force made the servant cry out in pain and retreat. He is actually a martial artist. When the others saw Tai Chingy's counterattack, they couldn't help but applaud. The commoners, who originally thought that things were not going well, were already prepared to complain about the 2 women's miserable fate. However, they didn't expect that the 2 women's skills were good and their counterattack was so sharp. This counterattack also fell into Yang Yang's eyes. His originally gloomy expression became much livelier in an instant. Good job. As long as the 2 of you can rush out, I will wait for you in front and go with you to the Yang family manor to clarify things." Yang Yang only brought 2 servants, afraid that they would be a burden to Tai Chingy. After saying this, he turned and walked towards the city gate of Yongding City. Originally, they didn't know what the result would be after fighting, but Yang Yang's words pointed them in the right direction. At this moment, the 2 women didn't hesitate and used both their hands and feet to dodge the Yu family servants who came rushing over. Tai Chingy's skills were good. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been chosen by Yang Chendong among the 500 people. It wasn't a problem to deal with 8 boorish men who relied on their status and background. With the help of her sister, Jiang Ping, after just a few dozen moves, the 8 Yu family servants fell to the ground and wailed in pain. Yu Xiong was also frightened and retreated, hiding in the crowd. No one came to stop them. Tai Chingy shouted to Jiang Ping, "Let's go quickly." The 2 of them quickly disappeared from the city gate. From the beginning to the end, the people from the warden's office of the 5 cities didn't appear. That was because they knew that Yu Xiong was about to do something bad. They were afraid that their appearance would delay his good deed, so of course, they would hide as far as possible. Unexpectedly, in the end, it helped Tai Chingy and Jiang Ping. When Yu Xiong saw that his servants were beaten to the ground, he was afraid that the 2 women would take revenge on him. Naturally, he rode his horse and hid far away. After seeing the 2 women escape, he returned to his original arrogant appearance and shouted loudly, "Where are the soldiers? Is no one coming to deal with the beating?" Outside the city, Yang Yang had only just arrived when Tai Chingy and Jiang Ping rushed over from afar. Looking at the 2 girls, he couldn't help but exclaim in admiration, "Good skills. 4th brother is a person who loves talents. I'm sure that after knowing how powerful you are, he will accept you as a student of the academy. How about this, follow me first." Yang Family Village. At the gate of the Yang Family Academy, some people were happy and some were sad. But no matter what kind of mood they had, the facts couldn't be changed. Many people left in disappointment, while some happily took things that could prove their identity and stepped into the academy. Last time, they only came to the outer courtyard of the academy. There, they were stunned by the 2 pressure wells that they had never seen before. But when they entered the inner courtyard of the academy, the spacious school building made of cement and the classrooms with expensive glass windows appeared in front of them, especially the row of neatly arranged dormitories. It was said that they were specially prepared for students. There was even a canteen for eating, a laundry room for washing clothes, and some cold fitness equipment that they had never seen before. But at this moment, they felt so warm and considerate. After entering the inner courtyard of the Yang Family Academy, the words moral, intelligence, physique, beauty, and work, and science and technology is the #1 productivity were sprayed on the walls, giving people a feeling of vitality and freshness. Everyone only knew a little about these phrases that they had never heard of before, but they could vaguely understand them. Everyone couldn't help but feel a sense of longing for the future. Inside the academy, there were already people in charge of receiving people. Any student who was accepted would receive a special room and a certain number of meal tickets. According to the staff, after coming here, they had to rely on themselves. No one was allowed to bring servants, and they had to rely on themselves for food, clothing, housing, and transportation. No one dared to go against this requirement. First, the number of young masters who could be accepted was limited. They were in the minority among the 100 people and couldn't cause any trouble. Second, the rules were written very clearly. Every student had 100 points of conduct. Once all of their points were deducted, that would be the time they had to leave. The rules also wrote that no matter what the reason was, if one didn't follow the rules of the academy, at least 2 points would be deducted. If one was the leader and the situation was serious, they might be directly expelled. Since it was written in the rules, it was a hard rule that no one dared to go against. So even though they were somewhat unwilling, no one raised any objections. Some of the young masters, including Wang Si, took the initiative to send their servants out of the academy. They also told them to tell their families that there would be a day off every 7 days in the academy. At that time, they would naturally go home to take a look. The people who were accepted received their plates one by one. Then, under the guidance of the staff, they first received their own bedding, meal tickets, and other daily necessities. Then, they were led to their respective rooms. According to these people, before lunch, the academy's principal, who was also the loyalty guild, would speak to them. At that time, the real life of a student would begin. And before that, everyone could temporarily relax and properly rest in their rooms. Although they didn't know what the real life of a student was, seeing how determined the staff was, they felt the pressure and cherished the short time they could rest before the official start. In the principal's office, Yang Chendong was listening to Tiger's Main's work report. Young master, after the announcement, there are 100 students who should have arrived. There are 98 who actually arrived. Please give us your instructions. There are 2 who didn't arrive? Poor they. Yang Chendong asked with a puzzled expression. This time, the people who signed up were all willing. Since they had the opportunity, why didn't they appear? His intuition told him that something unexpected must have happened. Reporting to the 6th young master, they are Tai Qingyi and her sworn sister, Jiang Ping. Tiger's Mane scratched his head, also confused. If it were someone else, it would be fine. Perhaps they would be obstructed by their family or even friends and change their minds at the last minute. But these 2 people had been seriously investigated. After losing their job as escorts, they had nowhere else to go. How could they not report after being accepted? It's them? After hearing the answer, Yang Chendong's face showed a trace of seriousness. Obviously, he had also thought of what Tiger's Mane thought. But soon, he shook his head and said, there is no reason for them to not appear after being accepted. If there is a possibility, then there is only one. They must have met with an accident. How about this? Arrange for the Security Bureau to investigate. Chapter 250. As soon as Yang Chendong finished speaking, Beta Persei's rough voice came from outside the door. Young master, Yang Si is here. He said he has something urgent to report. Let him in. After Yang Chendong nodded, the door was pushed open from the outside. Yang Si, wearing a pure cotton robe, walked in. Young master, 4th master is here. He also brought 2 girls with him. Behind them are some soldiers from the warden's office. What's going on? Hu Meng saw that Yang Si's words were a little out of place, so as their leader he asked, what do you think? Shaking his head, Yang Si also had a puzzled look on his face. Obviously, he also did not understand what was going on. Yang Chendong, on the other hand, had already stood up and said, "Whether it's a blessing or a curse, we'll deal with it accordingly. How about this? Immediately gather all the students. This young master will use this matter to teach everyone a lesson." With Yang Chendong's instructions, soon, a sharp whistle sounded. Soon, the 98 students who had entered the room hurriedly rushed out. They were familiarizing themselves with the rules of the academy, and one of them was to obey orders and follow instructions. One of the instructions was that everyone had to gather when the whistle sounded. No matter what you were doing, whether it was sleeping, eating, or urinating, you had to stop and gather. Otherwise, depending on the severity of the situation, you would be deducted more than 2 to 10 points. There was a total of 100 points, and no one wanted to be deducted just like that. Therefore, after hearing the whistle, whether it was the ordinary people or the young master, they all rushed out of the room at the first moment. The 98 people stood in a row according to their positions from the first to the last. Just as they were seated, Yang Chendong, wearing a green cotton robe, appeared in front of everyone under the protection of Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei. "All right, since you're all here, follow me out to watch the fun." As a student of the Yang Academy, the first thing they had to have was courage. In the future, Yang Chendong would have many examples to prove their courage. With Yang Chendong as the leader and the other students as support, a group of more than 100 people walked out of the Yang Academy. When they arrived at the gate, they saw Yang Chendong, 2 servants, Tai Qingyi, and Jiang Ping confronting dozens of soldiers from the 5 cities warden's office. As soon as the group of more than 100 people walked out, they attracted the attention of these 2 groups. When he saw that the leader was the Duke of Loyalty, Yang Chendong, Yang Yang's originally tense face relaxed a lot. "Sixth brother, I'm here." "Fourth brother." Seeing Yang Yang waving his hand at him, Yang Chendong, who originally had a confident face, had a hint of warmth in his eyes. Those who knew him knew that he would only show such a kind look to his family and the people he cared about. "Sixth brother, I'm afraid I've caused you trouble this time." Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with self-blame as he watched Yang Chendong walk closer and closer. "Fourth brother, you don't have to say that. You and I are brothers. Your business is naturally my business. What's going on?" Yang Chendong said as he casually glanced at the soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office. With just a glance, the dozens of soldiers on the opposite side quickly lowered their heads. After the 2 consecutive defeats against Tile, there was no one who didn't know about Yang Chendong. There was no one who didn't know about the military god. It was because of the war god's existence that not only did they not suffer any casualties, but they also made a lot of military achievements and gained a lot of benefits. Some of the soldiers' living conditions improved by more than a level, and all of this was thanks to Yang Chendong. For this reason, many soldiers' families also quietly set up a longevity memorial arch for Yang Chendong in order to express their gratitude in their hearts. But now, they wanted to cause trouble for him. It was no wonder these people didn't dare to look Yang Chendong in the eye. These people lowered their heads, and Yang Chendong withdrew his cold gaze. He then looked at Yang Yang and said, "Fourth brother, what's going on? Why are they following you?" "Sai, let the 2 of them explain." Yang Yang didn't know how to explain it, so he left it to Leng Qingyi and Jiang Ping. Yang Chendong had already noticed the 2 of them, but the difference in status was too great, so he didn't say anything. Now that his 4th brother pointed out the 2 of them, he used the momentum to look at them and said with an encouraging gaze, "Speak, what's going on?" "Greetings, Dong Shuai." Tai Qingyi and Jiang Ping were excited to see their idol standing in front of them, so they bowed and greeted him. Then Jiang Ping, who was more eloquent, explained the whole sequence of events to him. When Tiger's Mane heard that the matter involved Yu Xiong, the grandson of the Minister of Justice, Yu Shiyue, he signaled to one of his subordinates behind him, and the subordinate quickly disappeared. Soon, a note was brought over, and Tiger's Mane handed it to Yang Chendong. The note recorded some things about Yu Xiong, but because he wasn't a big shot, the record wasn't very detailed. There were only a few words. Yu Xiong, the 3rd of the brothers. Characteristics: there's nothing he doesn't know about eating, drinking, and having fun. He often deceives others. Once, in order to get a woman, he forced her husband to write a divorce letter and escape far away from home to protect himself. When he saw this, Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with coldness. Tell everyone to find the person. Understood. Tiger's mane had enough chemistry with Yang Chendong, so he naturally knew who he was referring to. At this moment, Jiang Ping also explained the cause and effect of the matter. Then, she and Tai Qingyi looked at Yang Chendong. Although they didn't say anything, they knew very well that if Dong Shuai didn't care about them, they would be taken away by the 5 cities warden's office for punishment. In fact, it wasn't just Tai Qingyi. Fourth brother Yang Chendong and the 98 new students of the Yang Academy were all looking at Yang Chendong, the dean of their academy. When Jiang Ping explained the cause and effect of the matter, they heard everything clearly, so they were naturally angry at Yu Xiong's actions. He just accidentally startled the horse and didn't cause any harm. Either he compensate you with some silver, or he apologize in front of everyone and admit his mistake. Why did he have to take people away and do such a beastly thing? This was really going too far. Especially some of the students who were originally from poor families, they had encountered such things in the past. Through this matter, it was as if he had seen himself in the past. Naturally, he felt like he had a common enemy. Sensing the rising anger around him, Yang Chendong calmly turned around and looked at everyone, including Tai Qingyi and the other 2 women. He said, I originally planned to gather everyone for a talk before lunch. Since there is such an opportunity, I will tell you in advance. The matter involved the Yang Academy, so all the students naturally put up their earphones. This was the first time they heard the dean speak, so of course they were very careful. Seeing that everyone was so serious, Yang Chendong nodded with satisfaction. He appreciated such an attitude. Since that was the case, he wouldn't be stingy with his words. Very good. Since everyone is able to enter the Yang Family Academy, it proves that everyone has a kind of fate. Although I can't guarantee that everyone will become the first batch of students of the academy, I will teach you with all my heart as long as you are here. The first lesson I will teach you today is the word righteousness. What is righteousness? It refers to the atmosphere of righteousness and spreading positive energy. Righteousness is a type of positive energy that is reflected in the righteousness of people. Righteousness is to walk the right path. It is to be filled with positive, righteous atmosphere. With a powerful voice, Yang Chendong continued, people who live between heaven and earth must be indomitable and have righteousness in their bodies. Only then, no matter what situation you are in, can you hold your head high and be respected by others. As long as you have righteousness in your heart, you can do things with a clear conscience. Only then can you face any difficulties and problems and solve them. Today, Tai Qingyi and Jiang Ping only walked a little too fast because they were anxious and didn't hurt anyone. This was originally a trivial matter, but some people always thought that they were a cut above others, always thinking that they could do whatever they wanted. Thus, they took the opportunity to create trouble, wanting to use extreme means to achieve extreme goals. This is the embodiment of not having righteousness. At the same time, it is also because there are too few people with righteousness that these people can survive and do whatever they want on the streets. I don't know if everyone has thought about it, but if everyone has righteousness in their hearts and can stand up to criticize Yu Xiong, what kind of scene would that be? Presumably, from then on, there will be no place for evil people in the world, and there will be fewer and fewer unjust things in the world, right? Therefore, in the first lesson, I will talk about the understanding of righteousness and the use of righteousness. At the same time, I will ask everyone to have righteousness. Not only must you have righteousness, but you must spread it to others. One day, when everyone has righteousness, then the world will be peaceful and the people will be prosperous. I look forward to the arrival of that day. Good. As soon as Yang Chendong finished his words, the crowd, led by Wang Si, began to cheer loudly. Waves of warm applause followed. Seeing that everyone agreed with his point of view, Yang Chendong smiled at everyone in satisfaction. Then, he turned to Tai Qingyi and Jiang Ping. The 2 of you have been accepted by the Yang Academy. Your names are on the list. Now, Please enter the academy to collect your things and understand the relevant rules. Chapter 251. Tai Qingyi and the other girl, who were originally very excited by the righteous words, showed joy and excitement when they heard Yang Chendong say that they were accepted. They immediately agreed happily. Just as they were about to enter the academy, they remembered that the people from the 5 cities warden's office were right in front of them. If they couldn't solve this problem, how could they study in peace in the academy? Noticing that the 2 girls' footsteps were a little hesitant, Yang Chendong nodded lightly. These 2 had not been blinded by the joy in front of them, so it could be seen that they were still very rational. After his good impression of the 2 girls improved a little, Yang Chendong suddenly turned to the soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office 30 steps away and said, "I presume you all know this Duke?" Yes, we greet the Duke of Loyalty and Courage." After being asked by Yang Chendong, these people did not dare to pretend to be deaf and mute. They immediately lowered their heads and said respectfully, "Very good, since you know this Duke, you can go back. If Yu Xiong asks, just say that the 2 of them are students of the Yang Academy. If you want to talk about it, just talk to this Duke. Of course, if you want to catch people, you can catch this Duke first, understand?" The more he spoke, the more serious Yang Chendong's expression became. This seriousness also caused the expressions of the soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office to change greatly. They repeatedly said that they did not dare and then turned to leave very decisively. What kind of joke was this? If they wanted to catch people, they would first catch Yang Chendong. Even if they had the courage, they would not dare to do this. If they really did it, not to mention whether they could do it or not, when they really returned home, their wives would not let them go. Their consciences would not be able to live with themselves. The soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office left because of Yang Chendong's words. They left so happily without a trace of reluctance. This made all the students very excited after seeing this. This was their dean. He had righteousness in his heart and was not afraid of any powerful people. They did not know when they would be able to be like this, facing all difficulties with one word and solving them with one word. A crisis was thus resolved. The 100 students all returned to their positions and walked towards the Yang Clan Academy. Yang Chendong came to Yang Chendong's side and asked with concern, "Sixth brother, will there be any trouble?" "What kind of trouble? We weren't in the wrong to begin with. It was all that Yu Xiong's fault. It was just a child's mischief. It wasn't a big deal. This time, I really have to thank fourth brother. If you hadn't appeared in time, I'm afraid that things would have gotten out of hand. At that time, it would have been much more troublesome to solve." "Hee, why don't we enter the courtyard and have a drink together?" Yang Chendong chuckled. Hearing that not only was there no mistake, but there was also merit, Yang Yang's high-hanging heart could finally settle down. "Good. It's rare for sixth brother to be so considerate. Fourth brother will drink with you. Hee, let me try your delicious food." Yang Yang's heart was clear. Everyone said that all the delicacies in the world were in the immortal abode. Actually, that was not the case. The delicacies of the Yang family manor were the ones that were on a whole new level. At that moment, the 2 brothers chatted and laughed as they walked towards the inner courtyard of the Yang family manor. Just as they arrived at the entrance, a beautiful girl blocked their path. "Dong Shuai, I also want to enter the Yang Clan Academy to study." The person who came was Junko. She had just witnessed everything that happened at the entrance of the academy and heard Yang Chendong's understanding of the word morality. While she was excited, she also believed that the academy must be a very mysterious place. She would definitely be able to learn a lot there. Therefore, she decided to recommend herself and asked to enter the academy as a student. In order to achieve this goal, Junko was prepared to be rejected. She used her seemingly weak body to block in front of Yang Chendong. She looked as if she would not let him pass if he did not agree. In the entire Yang family manor, there were not many people who dared to do this. Other than the few matriarchs, no one else would do this. Otherwise, the consequences would definitely make you regret it for the rest of your life. Junko was a beautiful girl. Perhaps this was her advantage. She used her body to block in front of Yang Chendong. She had no intention of letting him pass. Cough, sixth brother, I will go in first. I can already smell the wine, huh? Yang Chendong said tactfully. He knew that if he continued to stay here, it would only make things awkward for Yang Chendong. Therefore, he found an excuse and took the lead to walk into the inner courtyard of the Yang family manor. You guys go in too. Yang Chendong looked at Tiger's mane, who was still standing beside him. He only turned his head to the side. At this time, he was not alert at all. Yang Chendong shook his head and said aloud, Yes, young master. Tiger's mane couldn't wait to leave. After answering, he strode away. At the same time, the first guard, Chiu Vi, and the others followed behind him. Soon, only Yang Chendong and Junko were left. He finally asked, Why did you decide to study in the Yang Family Academy? Your bodyguard's body is fine. It should be time for you to leave. No, I'm not leaving. Junko shook her head and said firmly. Reason? Yang Chendong's tone was cold as he asked. Reason? Junko's beautiful big eyes turned and said, I admire the culture of the great Ming dynasty. It's that simple to learn the advanced knowledge here. Then after you learn it, go back and spread it to Japan? Yang Chendong seemed to be very specific. Junko didn't want to admit it, but she didn't know why. In front of Yang Chendong, she told him the truth. Perhaps she also knew that she couldn't lie to him with her strength. You're very honest. Yang Chendong first approved of Junko's attitude, but then he said, But why should I accept you? What's in it for me to take you in? Junko's eyes kept blinking. At this moment, she really wanted to tell Yang Chendong that she was the princess of Japan, but she was worried that once he knew her identity, Yang Chendong would report this matter to the imperial court of the great Ming dynasty. In that case, things would be a little troublesome. This was not what she wanted. If she couldn't use her identity to pressure him, then she could only use money. Junko said, I can give you a lot of gold and silver. Give me a number. A lot of gold and silver. You should have some understanding of me these days. You should know that I am not short of money. In fact, I have a lot of money. Yang Chendong didn't seem to agree with Junko's reason. When she said this, Junko's face turned pale. That's right, Yang Chendong might not be the richest person in the great Ming dynasty, but if they were to talk about who was the best at making money, no one would dare to say they were the best if Yang Chendong claimed to be second. Junko's face was still changing. On the other side, Yang Chendong had already opened his mouth and said, But who would dislike money? Since you want me to give you a price, I will give you 10,000 taels a day to study with me. What? Even though she had made some preparations and was even waiting for Yang Chendong to ask for an exorbitant price, she was still extremely shocked when she heard that it was 10,000 taels of silver a day. Her cherry lips opened so wide that she could swallow a pigeon egg. Isn't this too much? But you asked me to give you a price. Yang Chendong's face didn't change, but he was laughing in his heart. He seemed to like the feeling of teasing Junko. I asked you to give me a price, but 10,000 taels a day is still too expensive. I can't afford it. Junko had the support of the Japanese royal family. Naturally, she didn't lack money since she was a child. But 10,000 taels a day still scared her. Because even if the entire royal family added up all their expenses, they wouldn't be able to reach this amount in a day. If she reported the amount of money back to her country, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to get through her father's trial. Seeing Junko being so honest and saying that she couldn't afford it, Yang Chendong had to shake his head and said, Then there is no other way. You asked me to give you a price, but you can't afford it. You might as well not go to the academy to study. After saying that, Yang Chendong was about to leave, but Junko still stood in front of him, blocking his way. So, 1,000 taels a day, this is already the limit I can pay. As if she had made up her mind, Junko said these words with great effort, and her face was extremely serious. 1,000 taels a day in a month, it would be more than 30,000 taels. This was Junzi. Before she came to the great Ming dynasty, her father gave her a lot of good things, and some of them were even prepared for her future dowry. If it were other people, they wouldn't even dare to say such words. 1,000 taels a day, it seems to be a lot. Okay, it's a deal. But I'll say the ugly words first. As soon as you enter the academy, you have to listen to me. If you can't bear the hardships and take the initiative to withdraw, then don't come looking for trouble. Yang Chendong originally wanted to scare Junko. If he wanted to use this person, even if she didn't pay him a single tael, he would still agree. He just deliberately delayed it. But he didn't expect that there would be an unexpected gain. 1,000 taels a day was naturally nothing for him, but if there was money to be earned, then he would be a fool. No problem, I won't withdraw. I will stick to it. Thank you, Dong Shuai. Finally getting what she wanted, Junko's face was full of joy. She then turned around and walked away happily. She even seemed to be humming a famous Japanese song. Yang Chendong was a capable person, and a very capable one at that. If such a person could be used by the emperor, he would definitely become the most powerful arm. At this moment, if he stayed here, it meant that he had more opportunities to come into contact with Yang Chendong, and the possibility of recruiting him for his own use would naturally increase. Although Yang Chendong was already the loyal duke, and the hope was not great, at least there was hope, right? You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.